Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the streetlights flickered as I trudged home, my feet heavy with exhaustion. It had been one of those days where everything that could go wrong, did. The kind of day that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. I loosened my tie, feeling like it was strangling me, and let out a long sigh that hung in the crisp autumn air. That's when I first felt it. A presence. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia, a byproduct of too much caffeine and too little sleep. But as I walked down Maple Street with its neat rows of suburban houses and perfectly manicured lawns, the feeling intensified. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see a neighbor out for a late-night stroll, or maybe a stray cat. Instead, I saw nothing. Just empty sidewalk stretching back into the darkness. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Get a grip, Jack," I muttered to myself, picking up my pace. "You're letting your imagination run wild again." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. There was something there, just out of sight. Something tall and dark, lurking at the edge of my vision. Every time I turned to look directly at it, it vanished, only to reappear in my peripheral vision a moment later. My heart began to race, and I could feel sweat beating on my forehead despite the chill. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, thinking I'd call Sarah. She'd laugh at me, tell me I was being silly, but at least I'd hear a friendly voice. As I pulled out my phone, I caught a glimpse of movement reflected in the screen. A tall, dark figure, looming just behind me. I spun around, nearly dropping the phone in the process. Nothing. The street behind me was empty. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and scared even to my own ears. "Is someone there?" Silence answered me, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant bark of a dog. I turned back around, clutching my phone like a lifeline, and nearly ran the rest of the way home. With each step, I felt the presence growing stronger, closer. It was like being chased by my own shadow, always just a step behind no matter how fast I moved. When I finally reached my front door, I was panting, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the lock. As I fumbled with it, I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck like a breath of Arctic air. I froze, key halfway in the lock, too terrified to turn around. In the reflection of the window, I could see it clearly now. A tall, dark figure, featureless yet somehow familiar, standing right behind me. With a surge of adrenaline, I shoved the key in, twisted, and practically fell through the doorway. The door slammed shut behind me with a bang that echoed through the empty house. I leaned against the door, breath coming in ragged gasps, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. For a moment, all I could do was stand there, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't real, I told myself, running a shaky hand through my hair. You're stressed, you're tired, you're seeing things that aren't there. I pushed off from the door and fumbled for the light switch, desperate to banish the shadows that seemed to crowd around me. The living room lights flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the familiar space. Everything looked normal. My ratty old couch, the coffee table covered in magazines, Sarah's potted plants lining the windowsill. No sign of any tall, dark figures. I let out a nervous laugh, feeling silly for getting so worked up. "See? Nothing to worry about. You're home, you're safe, everything's fine." I tossed my keys onto the side table and shrugged off my jacket, already trying to put the whole bizarre experience behind me. Maybe I'd take a hot shower, fix myself a drink, try to relax. That's when I saw it. In the mirror hanging on the wall opposite me, a flicker of movement. I turned, slowly, dread settling in the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. There, in the middle of my living room, the shadows were moving, coalescing, taking shape. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as the amorphous darkness solidified into a humanoid figure. Tall, impossibly tall, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. And as it turned to face me, I felt my world tilt on its axis. It was me. A twisted, distorted version of me, but undeniably my own face staring back at me with eyes like bottomless pits. "No," I whispered, backing away until I hit the wall. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The thing that wore my face smiled, a grotesque parody of my own grin. When it spoke, its voice was mine, but wrong. Deeper, resonant, filled with a malevolence that made my skin crawl. "Oh, but it is real, Jack," it said, taking a step towards me. "I'm very real, and I've been waiting a long time for this moment." I shook my head, squeezing my eyes shut. "You're not real. You're just a hallucination. When I open my eyes, you'll be gone." A cold hand gripped my chin, forcing my head up. My eyes flew open, and I found myself staring directly into the creature's face, so close I could feel its icy breath on my skin. "I'm as real as you are," it hissed. "More real, perhaps. After all, I'm the part of you that you've been denying for so long, the darkness you try to hide. And now, I'm here to take what's rightfully mine." I tried to pull away, but its grip was like iron. "What are you talking about? What do you want from me?" The thing laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Want? I want everything, Jack. Your life, your identity, your very existence, and I'm going to take it all." With its free hand, it reached out and touched my chest. I felt a jolt like an electric shock and then a pulling sensation as if something was being drawn out of me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The room began to spin, darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my own face, twisted into a triumphant smirk. The world came back into focus slowly, like an old television warming up. I found myself sprawled on the living room floor, my head throbbing. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw it, me, standing there, grinning with my own face. "Welcome back, Jack," it said, my voice twisted into something sinister. "I was beginning to think you'd sleep through the whole thing." I scrambled to my feet, pressing my back against the wall. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" The thing that wore my face chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "I told you, Jack. I'm you. The real you. The you that you've been burying deep inside for years." It took a step closer, and I pressed myself harder against the wall, wishing I could melt right through it. "As for what I want, well, that's simple. I want your life." "My life?" I repeated, bewildered. "What do you mean?" The creature's grin widened, showing too many teeth. "Exactly what I said. I'm going to replace you, Jack. Step into your shoes, live your life, do all the things you've been too afraid to do." My mind raced, trying to make sense of this impossible situation. That's insane. You can't just replace me. People will know. Sarah will know." "Will she?" it asked, cocking its head to one side. "Are you so sure about that? After all, I know everything you know. Every memory, every secret, every little quirk." It laughed again. "I might even be a better you than you are." I lunged for my phone on the coffee table, my fingers closing around it. If I could just call someone, anyone. But as I lifted the phone, it crumbled in my hand like ash, slipping through my fingers and scattering across the floor. The creature tutted. "None of that now. We can't have you calling for help, can we? This is between you and me, Jack. Or should I say, me and me?" I stared at the dark smudges on my palm where the phone had been, my last hope literally slipping through my fingers. "This isn't possible," I muttered. "I'm losing my mind. That's it. I finally cracked under the pressure." "Oh, Jack," the thing said, shaking its head in mock disappointment. "Always looking for the easy way out, aren't you? Always trying to convince yourself that your problems aren't real, that if you just ignore them hard enough, they'll go away." It started to pace the room, examining the photos on the walls, the knickknacks on the shelves. That's why Sarah's getting tired of you, you know. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? Sarah's not. Not what? Not fed up with your lack of ambition? Not sick of waiting for you to finally commit? Not wondering if she made a mistake moving in with you? The creature picked up a framed photo of Sarah and me, taken on our last vacation. She deserves better than you, Jack, and once I take your place, she'll have it. You stay away from her, I growled, a surge of protectiveness overriding my fear for a moment. The thing laughed. Or what? What are you going to do, Jack? You can't even stand up to your boss when he dumps extra work on you at 4:55 on a Friday. You think you can stand up to me? I clenched my fists, anger and fear warring inside me. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you, it countered. I know about the novel you've been too afraid to finish. I know about the promotion you didn't apply for because you were scared of the extra responsibility. I know about the engagement ring you bought 6 months ago that's still sitting in your sock drawer because you can't work up the courage to propose. Each word was like a knife, cutting deeper and deeper. How could it know these things, these secret shames, these private fears? I know about the time you cheated on your college entrance exam. It continued, relentless. I know about the lie you told your parents about why you dropped out of law school. I know about the nights you lie awake, wondering if you've wasted your life, if you'll ever amount to anything. Stop it, I whispered, covering my ears like a child. Just stop. But it didn't stop. It kept going, dredging up every regret, every mistake, every moment of weakness I'd ever had. With each revelation, I felt myself growing smaller, weaker, while the creature seemed to grow larger, more solid. This is why I'm here, Jack, it said, its voice almost gentle now. To free you from all this, to take all these burdens off your shoulders. Isn't that what you've always wanted? To escape? For a moment, a treacherous part of me was tempted, to just let go, to not have to deal with any of it anymore. But then I thought of Sarah, of my parents, of my friends. I couldn't just abandon them, couldn't let this thing take my place. No, I said, forcing strength into my voice. No, I don't want to escape. This is my life, and I'm not giving it up. The creature's face darkened, my features twisting into a scowl. I wasn't asking, Jack. This isn't a choice. It's happening whether you like it or not. I turned and ran for the back door, my heart pounding. If I could just get outside, call for help. But when I reached the spot where the back door should have been, there was nothing but a blank wall. No, I gasped, running my hands over the smooth surface. No, no, no. I spun around, wild-eyed, to find the creature right behind me. There's nowhere to run, Jack, it said, reaching out with hands that looked just like mine but felt cold as ice. It's time to face yourself. As its hands closed around my throat, I realized with horrible clarity that this was no nightmare I could wake up from. The icy grip around my throat loosened, but the relief was short-lived. As I gasped for air, I noticed something horrifying. My hands were becoming transparent. I held them up to my face, watching in disbelief as I could see right through my own flesh to the wall behind. What's happening to me? I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. The shadow self, wearing my face like an ill-fitting mask, grinned. You're fading, Jack, making room for the real you. I looked down at my body, watching as the transparency spread from my fingertips up my arms. It was like I was being erased bit by bit. Panic surged through me, and I opened my mouth to scream, to call for help, to make any sound at all. But nothing came out. My voice had disappeared along with my solidity. The shadow self chuckled, the sound grating against my nerves. Scream all you want, Jack. No one can hear you now. You're becoming a ghost in your own life. I tried to lunge at the creature, to grab it, to fight back somehow, but my hands passed right through it like trying to catch smoke. The shadow self, on the other hand, seemed to be growing more solid with each passing moment. Its edges were sharper, its colors more vivid. It was as if it was stealing my very existence. "Don't fight it, Jack," it said. Its voice, my voice, growing stronger and more confident. "This is how it's meant to be. You've been holding me back for too long. It's time for me to live." I shook my head frantically, trying to deny what was happening, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. I was disappearing, and this thing was taking my place. The shadow self turned away from me, surveying the living room with a critical eye. "This won't do at all," it muttered. "Too safe, too boring. Just like you, Jack." To my horror, it began rearranging the furniture. It shoved the couch against a different wall, scattering the throw pillows Sarah had carefully arranged. It knocked over the potted plants on the windowsill, soil spilling across the hardwood floor. "Stop it!" I tried to shout, but no sound came out. I could only watch helplessly as this imposter remade my home in its image. The creature picked up the guitar I'd bought years ago, intending to learn but never finding the time. It strummed a chord, the sound jarring in the quiet room. "Maybe I'll actually play this thing," it mused. "Do all the things you were too afraid to try." I made another attempt to grab the guitar to stop this invasion of my life, but my hands passed right through it, as insubstantial as mist. The shadow self didn't even seem to notice my efforts, continuing its redecorating with savage glee. My eyes fell on a framed photo on the bookshelf, a picture of my parents and me at my college graduation. I reached for it, desperate for some connection to my life, my identity. But my fingers slipped through the frame, through the glass, unable to make contact. A sob caught in my throat as the reality of my situation truly hit me. I was losing everything: my home, my body, my very existence. And there seemed to be nothing I could do to stop it. The shadow self noticed my distress and paused in its destruction. It picked up the photo I had failed to touch, studying it with an unsettling intensity. "Your parents," it mused. "They always wanted so much more for you, didn't they, Jack? Always pushing you to be better, to achieve more." It traced a finger over the image of my smiling face. "I wonder how they'll react when their son finally starts living up to his potential." "You're not their son," I mouthed silently, fury and despair warring inside me. "You're not me." The creature's grin widened. "But I am you, Jack. The you that's been buried deep inside all this time. The you that's not afraid to take risks, to go after what he wants. The you that your parents always hoped you'd become." It set the photo down, turning to face me fully. "I'm going to live your life better than you ever could. I'll get that promotion at work. I'll finish that novel you've been too scared to write. I'll marry Sarah and give her the life she deserves." Its eyes glittered with malicious glee. "And the best part? No one will ever know the difference." I shook my head frantically, trying to deny its words. But deep down, a traitorous part of me wondered if it was right. Would anyone really notice if I was replaced by a more confident, more ambitious version of myself? The thought sent a chill through me, colder than the numbness that was spreading through my fading body. I had to fight this. I had to find a way to stop it. But as I struggled against the inevitable, I felt myself growing weaker. The edges of my vision began to darken, the world around me fading away just as I was. I tried to cling to consciousness, to maintain my grip on reality, but it was like trying to hold on to water. The last thing I saw as the darkness closed in was my own face, twisted into a sinister smile. But it wasn't my face anymore. It belonged to the thing that had stolen my life. "Sweet dreams, Jack," the shadow self said, its voice echoing as if from a great distance. "Don't worry. I'll take good care of your life, better than you ever did." And then, there was nothing but darkness and silence. I floated in a void, formless, bodiless, barely aware of my own existence. Was this death? Or something worse? As consciousness slipped away entirely, one last thought echoed through the emptiness of my mind. This can't be the end. I have to find a way back. I have to reclaim my life. But how could I fight back when I no longer existed? The question followed me into the abyss, unanswered and terrifying in its implications. As I faded away completely, I clung to one desperate hope, that somehow, someway, this wasn't truly the end of Jack Thorne. I drifted in and out of consciousness, floating in an endless void. Time had no meaning here, in this place of shadows and silence. When awareness finally returned fully, I found myself in a world of darkness, my body nothing more than a wisp of smoke. At first, I thought I was dead. But as my senses slowly returned, I realized I was still in my house, or rather, what used to be my house. Everything looked different, shrouded in a perpetual twilight. Objects were hazy and indistinct, as if viewed through a thick fog, and there, moving through this shadowy version of my home, was the imposter, the shadow self that had stolen my life. I watched, helpless and horrified, as it went about its day, wearing my face, speaking with my voice, living my life. It got ready for work, whistling cheerfully as it knotted my favorite tie around its neck. "Looking good, Jack," it said to its reflection, my reflection, in the mirror. "Today's the day you ask for that promotion. No more playing it safe." I tried to shout, to tell it to stop, but my voice made no sound in this twilight world. I was nothing more than a ghost, unable to affect the world around me. The shadow self strode confidently out of the house, and to my surprise I found myself pulled along in its wake, tethered to this thing that had stolen my identity. I watched as it drove to my office, walked in with a swagger I had never possessed, and marched straight to my boss's office. "Mr. Hanson," it said, knocking on the door frame, "do you have a moment? I'd like to discuss my future with the company." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This thing was doing everything I had always been too afraid to do, and worse, it was working. Mr. Hanson looked impressed by its confidence, its ambitious plans. By the end of the day, the shadow self had secured not just a promotion, but a corner office. As we returned home, and wasn't that a bitter thought, that this thing now considered my home its own, I saw my dog, Max, waiting by the door. For a moment, hope flared in my insubstantial chest. Surely Max would know this wasn't really me. The shadow self opened the door and Max began to growl, hackles raised. He could sense something was wrong. I tried to call out to him, to encourage him, but of course he couldn't hear me. "Quiet, you mangy mutt," the shadow self snarled, its pleasant facade dropping now that it was alone. Well, alone as far as it knew. Max continued to growl, backing away from the thing wearing my face. The shadow self's expression twisted in anger, and before I could even react, it lashed out with a swift kick to Max's ribs. Max yelped in pain and surprise, scurrying away to hide under the coffee table. I felt a surge of rage, wanting nothing more than to protect my faithful companion. But I could do nothing but watch as the shadow self chuckled darkly. "That's better," it said. "Know your place, dog. Things are different now." I stayed close to Max for the rest of the evening, wishing I could comfort him, apologize for what had happened, but I was nothing more than a wisp of smoke, unable to interact with the physical world. The next day brought a new horror. Sarah, my girlfriend, came to visit. I saw her pull up in her car, and for a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Surely she would realize this thing wasn't really me. But as I watched their interaction, my non-existent heart sank. The shadow self played its role perfectly, mimicking my mannerisms, using inside jokes, recalling shared memories. And it added just enough confidence, just enough charm, to make Sarah's eyes light up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Jack," she said, sounding pleasantly surprised. "What's gotten into you lately? You seem different, more sure of yourself." The shadow self grinned, pulling her close. "Just finally decided to go after what I want, that's all. Life's too short to play it safe, right?" Sarah beamed at him. "At it." "I like this new you," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I tried to scream, to push them apart, but my hands passed right through them, I could only watch in anguished silence as the thing wearing my face kissed the woman I loved. After Sarah left, promising to return for dinner the next night, the shadow self's demeanor changed. It began rifling through my desk drawers, muttering to itself. "Where are they? I know they're here somewhere." With a jolt, I realized what it was looking for. My manuscripts. The unfinished stories I'd been too afraid to show anyone, too insecure to try and publish. How did it know about them? The shadow self finally found them hidden in the back of my closet. It pulled out the stack of papers, flipping through them with a sneer. "Pathetic," it muttered. "All that potential wasted. Well, we can't have these hanging around, can we? Wouldn't want anyone to see how mediocre you really are, Jack." To my horror, it took the manuscripts to the fireplace. I tried desperately to stop it, to save my work, but my hands passed right through everything I tried to grab. The shadow self lit a fire and page by page began to feed my stories to the flames. I watched, helpless and heartbroken, as years of work turned to ash. Each burning page felt like a piece of me being destroyed. By the time the fire died down, nothing remained of my writing but cinders and smoke. The shadow self dusted off its hands, looking satisfied. "There," it said, "clean slate. Time to write something worth reading." As it settled at my desk and began to type, filled with a creative energy I had always struggled to muster, I felt myself slipping back into the shadows. The constant strain of trying to interact with a world that couldn't see or hear me was exhausting. I retreated to a corner of the room, curling in on myself. How long could this go on? How long could I bear to watch this thing live my life, doing it better than I ever had? And most terrifyingly of all, if it was truly better at being me than I was, did I even deserve to take my life back? As I faded once more into the twilight world that had become my prison, these questions echoed in the void. I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my existence. But in this shadowy half-life with no way to interact with the real world, what could I possibly do? The sound of keys clacking on the keyboard faded as I slipped back into unconsciousness, the shadow self's words echoing in my mind. Time to write something worth reading. If only I could find a way to write my own ending to this nightmare. I don't know how long I drifted in the twilight world, time losing all meaning in this half-existence. But gradually I became aware of others. Wisps of smoke like myself, barely visible even in this shadowy realm. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, my mind finally fracturing under the strain of my situation. But then one of them spoke. "You're new here, aren't you?" The voice was faint, like a whisper on the wind, but undeniably real. I tried to focus to give my amorphous form some semblance of shape. Who are you?" I managed to ask, my own voice sounding strange and distant to my non-existent ears. A vaguely human-shaped mist coalesced before me. "I'm Maria. Or I was. Now, I'm not sure what I am. None of us are." As she spoke, I became aware of other shapes forming around us. Men, women, young, old, all as insubstantial as smoke, all with the same lost, haunted look in their eyes. "What happened to you?" I asked, a creeping dread filling me as I began to suspect the answer. "The same thing that happened to you," Maria replied. "We were replaced, pushed out of our own lives by something wearing our faces, living our lives." The other shadows murmured in agreement, a sound like leaves rustling in an autumn breeze. "How long have you been here?" I asked, dreading the answer. Maria's form seemed to sag. "I've lost track. Months, years. Time doesn't work the same here." The thought of being trapped in this twilight world for years sent a chill through me. "There has to be a way out," I insisted, "a way to reclaim our lives." A harsh laugh came from behind me. I turned to see an older woman, her smoky form more defined than the others, as if she'd had more practice holding her shape. "Oh, there's a way," she said, her voice bitter. "But the cost is terrible." I moved closer to her, desperate for any information. Please tell me. Whatever it is, it can't be worse than this half-life. The old woman studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. I'll tell you what I know, but don't say I didn't warn you. She began to explain, her voice low and urgent. The creatures that replaced us, they're not invincible. They're parasites feeding off our lives, our identities. But they need a host. If we can force them out, we can reclaim our lives, I finished, hope surging through me. Yes, she said, but there's a catch. They can't exist without a host. If we force them out, they'll die, unless they find another body to inhabit. The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow. You mean, to save ourselves, we'd have to damn someone else to this fate, she confirmed. Push the creature into another innocent person, trapping them here in our place. I recoiled, horrified at the thought. Could I really do that to someone else? Condemn them to this twilight existence just to save myself? There has to be another way, I insisted. The old woman shook her head. If there is, I haven't found it. And believe me, I've looked. As I grappled with this terrible knowledge, I felt a familiar pull. The shadow self was on the move again, and I was being dragged along in its wake. I found myself back in my house. No, the shadow self's house now. Sarah was there, and they seemed to be in the middle of an argument. I don't understand, Jack, Sarah was saying, her voice trembling. You've been so different lately. At first I thought it was a good change, but now... The shadow self's face, my face, twisted into an expression of anger I'd never seen in the mirror. Now what? It growled. Now you're having second thoughts? Now that I'm finally becoming the man you always wanted me to be? Sarah took a step back, looking scared. This isn't you, Jack. The man I fell in love with would never speak to me like this. Maybe you never really knew me, the shadow self snarled. It took a menacing step forward, fists clenched at its sides. I tried to intervene, to put myself between them, but of course I was powerless. I could only watch in horror as the shadow self raised its hand. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Sarah stumbled back, her hand to her cheek, tears welling in her eyes. Jack, she whispered, disbelief and hurt warring in her voice. The shadow self seemed to realize it had gone too far. Its expression softened, becoming a mask of contrition. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. It won't happen again, I promise. But I could see the lie in its eyes. This wasn't a one-time thing. The violence was part of its nature, and it would only get worse. As Sarah left, still shaken, I felt something inside me shift. The moral dilemma I'd been wrestling with suddenly seemed crystal clear. Yes, reclaiming my life might mean condemning another soul to this twilight existence, but leaving this creature in control of my life, hurting the people I loved, that was unthinkable. I had to fight back, no matter the cost. I focused all my will, all my remaining energy, on making myself heard. I'm coming for you, I said, my voice barely a whisper in the physical world. Do you hear me? This isn't over. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the shadow self pause. Its head tilted, as if listening for something just on the edge of hearing. Then it shook its head and went back to its life. My life. But that moment was enough. It could hear me, even if only faintly. Which meant I could fight. I retreated back to the twilight world, seeking out the old woman who had shared the terrible secret. Tell me everything, I said when I found her. Tell me how to force it out. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. It won't be easy, she warned. And once you start down this path, there's no going back. Are you sure this is what you want? I thought of Sarah's tears, of Max cowering in fear, of all the damage this creature could do if left unchecked. I'm sure, I said. Whatever it takes, I have to try. The old woman nodded again, a grim smile on her face. Then let's begin. First, you need to understand what these creatures are and where they come from. As she began to explain, I felt a mix of determination and fear. I was about to embark on a battle for my very existence, with no guarantee of success. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. I would reclaim my life, no matter the cost. The old woman's lessons were grueling, testing the limits of my non-corporeal form. For what felt like days, though time had little meaning in this twilight realm, I strained and pushed, trying to affect the physical world. Focus, the old woman's voice echoed in my mind. Concentrate all your energy on a single point. Imagine your will as a laser, cutting through the veil between our world and theirs. I tried over and over until I was ready to give up. But then finally it happened. A pencil on my desk, the shadow self's desk now, rolled a fraction of an inch. Excitement surged through me. I did it, I exclaimed, my wispy form pulsing with energy. The old woman nodded, a grim smile on her face. It's a start. Now do it again. And again. Until you can do it without thinking. And so I practiced, tirelessly. Slowly I gained more control. I could move small objects, create cold spots, even generate faint sounds. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As my power grew, I noticed a change in the shadow self. It became jumpy, paranoid. I watched as it spun around suddenly, eyes darting around the room. "Is someone there?" It called out, my voice tinged with uncertainty. I felt a surge of satisfaction. It could sense me. Good. The shadow self's paranoia grew. It started checking over its shoulder constantly, jumping at small noises. I watched as it argued with Sarah, snapping at her when she asked if everything was okay. "I'm fine," it snarled. Just leave me alone for a while, okay?" Sarah left, hurt and confused, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I had to stay focused. This was working. I was getting to it. One night when the shadow self was asleep, I made my move. Concentrating all my energy, I managed to grasp a pen. The effort was enormous, and I knew I wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Quickly, shakily, I scrawled a message on a piece of paper. "Sarah, this isn't me. I've been replaced. Please help." I collapsed after writing it, drained. But I felt a glimmer of hope. Surely Sarah would see this and realize something was wrong. The next morning, I watched anxiously as Sarah discovered the note. Her brow furrowed as she read it. "Jack," she called out, "what's this?" The shadow self came into the room, looking confused. It read the note, then laughed, though I could see the tension in its shoulders. "Oh, that," it said, forcing a casual tone. "Just a little joke. I was thinking of writing a creepy story, you know. Thought I'd try out some ideas." Sarah frowned. "It's not very funny, Jack. You know I don't like scary stuff." The shadow self pulled her into a hug. "I'm sorry, babe. I didn't mean to upset you. I'll throw it away." And just like that, my warning was crumpled up and tossed in the trash. I felt despair washing over me. How could I fight this thing if no one would believe me? But I wasn't alone in this fight. Back in the Twilight Realm, I found others like me, the shadow people, gathering. They had been watching, learning from my efforts. "We need to work together," Maria said, her smoky form rippling with determination. "If we combine our energy, we might be able to do more." The others murmured in agreement. We began to plan, strategizing how to confront our replacements. Some suggested trying to communicate through dreams. Others thought we should focus on moving larger objects, creating disturbances that couldn't be ignored. As we prepared, I found myself drawn to the old woman who had been teaching me. There was something familiar about her, something I couldn't quite place. "I never asked your name," I realized suddenly. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Eleanor," she said finally. My name was Eleanor. The name hit me like a physical blow. "Eleanor?" I repeated, memories flooding back. "But that's impossible. Eleanor was your grandmother," she finished for me, her smoky form seeming to sag. "Yes, Jack, I'm your grandmother." I reeled from the revelation. "But how?" "You died years ago. I went to your funeral." Eleanor's form rippled with what might have been a sigh. Did you ever wonder why I changed so much in my last years? Why I became so unlike myself? The pieces started to fall into place. You mean? She nodded. I was replaced, just like you. The Eleanor you knew in those last years, the one who died, that wasn't me. It was one of them. I felt sick. All this time, my real grandmother had been trapped here, watching as an imposter lived out her final years. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Would you have believed me? She countered. Besides, I didn't want to burden you with this knowledge, but now you need to understand what we're really up against. Her revelation added a new urgency to our plans. These creatures hadn't just stolen our lives, they'd been doing it for years, maybe even generations. How many others were out there trapped like us? As we finalized our strategy, I felt a mix of determination and fear. We were about to confront beings that had successfully impersonated us, fooled our loved ones. The odds were stacked against us. But looking around at the other shadow people, at my grandmother, I knew we had to try. This wasn't just about reclaiming our lives anymore. It was about stopping these creatures before they could hurt anyone else. Are we ready? I asked, my wispy form pulsing with nervous energy. The others gathered around, an army of shadows preparing for war. Maria nodded, her form seeming to solidify with resolve. As ready as we'll ever be. Eleanor, my grandmother, moved to my side. Remember, Jack, she said softly. No matter what happens, you're not alone in this fight. I nodded, grateful for her presence. Together, we turned our attention to the veil separating our world from the physical realm. It was time to take back what was ours. As we prepared to cross over, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen when we confronted our replacements? Could we really reclaim our lives? And even if we did, would anything ever be the same again? With these questions swirling in my mind, we began our assault on the barrier between worlds. The resistance had begun. The moment we had been preparing for was finally upon us. Our army of shadows, led by myself, Maria, and my grandmother Eleanor, surged forward into the physical world. The sensation was indescribable, like pushing through a membrane, every particle of our non-corporeal forms straining against the barrier between realms. As we broke through, the physical world erupted into chaos. Lights flickered and burst, sending showers of sparks raining down. Objects began to fly off shelves, swirling through the air in a ghostly tornado. The very air seemed to crackle with otherworldly energy. I found myself in my living room, or rather, the living room that had once been mine. The shadow self that had stolen my life was there, its eyes wide with shock and fear as it witnessed the supernatural storm we had unleashed. "What's happening?" Sarah cried out, clinging to the shadow self's arm. I felt a pang of jealousy and rage at the sight. The shadow self's face contorted with fury as it spotted me, a wisp of smoke in the shape of the man I used to be. "You," it snarled. "I should have known you'd find a way to fight back." I tried to speak, to warn Sarah, but my voice came out as little more than a whisper on the wind. The shadow self, however, seemed to hear me perfectly. "Oh no." It laughed, a cruel sound that was all wrong coming from my mouth. "You're too late. We're too strong now." As if summoned by its words, more solid figures began to appear. Other shadow selves, gathering from all over the neighborhood, the city, perhaps even further. I saw the things that had replaced Maria, Eleanor, and the other shadow people I'd come to know. "What are they?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she looked from one identical version of me to the ghostly shape I had become. The shadow self grinned, no longer bothering to hide its true nature. "We are the future," it declared. "The next step in evolution. We've been among you for generations, growing stronger, preparing." "Preparing for what?" I managed to ask, my wispy form straining with the effort of manifesting in the physical world. To take over, of course. Another shadow self answered, this one wearing the face of a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize. Why should we lurk in the shadows when we can simply replace you all? The horror of their plan became clear. This wasn't just about individual lives being stolen. They intended to supplant the entire human race. We won't let that happen, Maria's voice rang out, stronger than I had ever heard it in the shadow realm. And with that, the battle truly began. It was like nothing I could have imagined. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist as we shadow people clashed with our solid counterparts. We pushed with all our willpower, trying to force them out of the bodies they had stolen. They fought back with a strength born of desperation and malevolence. Objects flew through the air like missiles. Walls cracked and buckled. The laws of physics seemed to break down as two realms collided. I grappled with my shadow self, feeling as though I was trying to wrestle with smoke while being made of smoke myself. Every time I thought I had a grip on it, it slipped away, laughing. You can't win, it taunted. I'm you, but stronger. Better. I deserve this life more than you ever did. It's not yours to take, I shouted back, my voice gaining strength as I fought. Around me, I could see the other battles raging. Maria was a whirlwind of ghostly energy, battering at her replacement with a fury I hadn't known she possessed. Eleanor, my grandmother, faced off against the thing that had stolen her final years, her form seeming to glow with righteous anger. But we were outmatched. For every small victory we gained, the shadow selves seemed to grow stronger. They fed off our efforts, our emotions, using them to root themselves more firmly in the physical world. To my horror, I saw one of our allies, a young man whose name I had never learned, simply disappear. One moment he was there, locked in combat with his replacement, and the next he was gone, not even a wisp of smoke remaining. His shadow self grinned triumphantly, seeming to grow more solid in the wake of its victory. No, I cried out, but there was nothing I could do. One by one I watched as more of our shadow allies were destroyed. Each loss seemed to make the shadow selves stronger, more real. Do you see now? My shadow self laughed. You can't beat us. Every one of you we destroy makes us more powerful. Soon there will be nothing left of you, of any of you. Despair threatened to overwhelm me. How could we fight against this? We were literally fading away while they only grew stronger. And then, just as all seemed lost, I noticed something. A flicker, a momentary weakness in my shadow self's form. It happened when Sarah, who had been watching the battle in mute horror, called out my name. Jack, please stop this. For just a second, the shadow self's form wavered. Its eyes, so cold and cruel, showed a flicker of something. Confusion? Pain? I pressed my advantage, pushing harder against it. Sarah, I called out, my voice stronger than ever. Sarah, it's me, the real me. The shadow self snarled, lashing out at me with renewed fury. But I had seen its weakness now, and I understood. They're connected to us, I shouted to my allies. To our lives, our loved ones. That's their weakness. Maria caught on quickly. She turned to her replacement and began speaking rapidly in Spanish, words of love and memory that I couldn't understand, but whose effect was immediately apparent. The shadow self wearing Maria's face began to flicker and waver. All around the room, the tide of battle began to turn. Shadow people called out to loved ones, invoked shared memories, spoke of connections that ran deeper than flesh and blood. My own shadow self was weakening, its grip on my life loosening. Sarah, I called out again. Remember our first date? The picnic in the park when it started to rain and we ended up dancing in the downpour? Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. Jack, is it really you? No, the shadow self howled. I'm Jack now. I'm real. But its protests were weakening. I could feel myself growing stronger, more substantial, as it began to fade. The battle raged on, the very fabric of reality groaning under the strain of our clash. But now, at last, we had hope. We had found the shadow self's weakness and we were exploiting it for all we were worth. As the confrontation reached its climax, I knew that everything hung in the balance. The fate of not just our individual lives, but possibly the entire human race would be decided here and now. With one final push, I threw everything I had at my shadow self. All my memories, my loves, my fears, my hopes, everything that made me who I was. "I am Jack Thorne," I declared, my voice ringing with certainty. "And you are nothing but a pale imitation." The shadow self's scream of defiance turned to one of despair as it began to dissolve. But even as victory seemed within our grasp, I knew the battle was far from over. The other shadow selves were still fighting, and who knew how many more were out there waiting to take our place. As the confrontation reached its peak, I steeled myself for whatever would come next. We had found their weakness, yes, but exploiting it fully would require more strength than I knew if I possessed. The fate of everything I knew and loved hung in the balance, and I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The battle raged on, reality warping around us as I pushed harder against my shadow self. With each memory I invoked, each emotion I poured into my assault, I felt myself becoming more substantial. It was as if I was clawing my way back into existence, reclaiming my rightful place in the physical world. "Remember our wedding day, Sarah?" I called out, my voice growing stronger. "The way you looked walking down the aisle, how your eyes lit up when you saw me?" Sarah's eyes widened, tears streaming down her face as she looked between me and my fading doppelganger. "Jack, I remember. I remember everything." The shadow self howled in agony, its form flickering like a faulty hologram. "No, this is my life now. You can't take it from me." But its protests were growing weaker. I could feel the tide turning, not just in my own battle, but all around us. Other shadow people were following my lead, calling out to loved ones, invoking shared memories and deep connections. Maria's voice rang out clear and strong, speaking rapid-fire Spanish to her confused family members who had just entered the room. Her shadow self was fading fast, unable to maintain its grip in the face of such powerful emotional ties. My grandmother, Eleanor, her ghostly form glowing with a fierce light, confronted the thing that had stolen her final years. "You may have taken my death," she declared, "but you will never take my legacy." As I pushed harder, I began to feel sensations I had almost forgotten. The solidity of the floor beneath my feet, the brush of air against my skin, the weight of my own body. I was coming back, truly coming back. The shadow self's screams reached a fever pitch, echoing through the house with an otherworldly resonance. Windows rattled, lights flickered, and the very air seemed to vibrate with its anguish. "You don't understand what you're doing," it shrieked. "We are evolution. We are the future." "No," I countered, my voice firm and unwavering. "You're parasites, and your time is over." With one final push, I felt something give way. There was a blinding flash of light, a sound like reality itself tearing, and then silence. I blinked, disoriented. I was standing in my living room, solid and real. The shadow self was gone, not even a wisp of smoke remaining to mark its existence. Around the room, other victims were reappearing, their physical forms solidifying as their shadow selves faded away. But not everyone had been so fortunate. Some of my allies remained trapped between worlds, their forms flickering and insubstantial. Maria was one of them, her eyes wide with panic as she realized she couldn't fully manifest. "Jack," she called out, her voice faint and distant. "What's happening? Why can't I come back?" Before I could respond, the door burst open. Sarah walked in, her eyes wild with confusion and fear. She froze at the threshold, taking in the bizarre scene before her. Two versions of me stood in the living room. Myself, newly restored to physical form, and the shadow self, faded but still clinging to existence. Around us, other people flickered in and out of reality, caught between worlds. "Jack?" Sarah's voice trembled. What What is this? What's going on? I took a step towards her, my heart aching at the fear in her eyes. Sarah, it's me. The real me. I know this is hard to believe, but don't listen to him. The shadow self interrupted, its voice weak, but still carrying that unnatural resonance. I'm the Jack you've known for months. He's the imposter. Sarah's gaze darted between us, confusion and doubt warring in her expression. I don't understand. How can there be two of you? I opened my mouth to explain, but the shadow self cut me off again. It was fading fast, its form becoming more transparent by the second, but it wasn't giving up without a fight. You want to know the truth? It snarled, its eyes wild with desperation. Fine. Here's your precious truth. The shadow self's form seemed to expand, filling the room with a cold, unnatural light. When it spoke again, its voice echoed with the weight of countless others. We are not just parasites or body snatchers, it declared. We are the next step in human evolution. For millennia, we have existed alongside you, guiding your development, preparing you for the next stage of existence. Images flashed through the air. Ancient cave paintings, medieval tapestries, modern photographs, all showing strange, shadowy figures lurking at the edges of human history. You think your civilizations, your technologies, your greatest achievements were all your own doing? The shadow self laughed bitterly. We have been there every step of the way, nudging you forward, preparing you for the ultimate transformation. I felt a chill run down my spine as the implications of its words sank in. What transformation? I demanded. The shadow self's grin was terrible to behold. The merging of our kinds, of course, the creation of a new species, neither fully human nor fully whatever we are. A perfect hybrid capable of existing in multiple realities at once. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's impossible. Is it? The shadow self countered. Look around you. Look at those caught between worlds. They're the first glimpses of what humanity could become. I glanced at Maria, at the others still flickering in and out of existence. Was this really our destiny? To become like them, trapped between realities? No, I said firmly, pushing aside my doubts. Whatever your grand plan is, whatever you think you're preparing us for, it's wrong. You don't have the right to make that choice for us. The shadow self snarled, making one last lunge towards me. You fool! You have no idea what you're giving up, what you're condemning your entire species to. But its strength was spent. As it reached for me, its form dissipated like smoke in the wind. With a final, agonized wail, the shadow self vanished completely. The room fell silent, the echoes of its revelation hanging heavy in the air. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, confusion, and the first glimmers of recognition. Jack? She whispered. Is it really you? I nodded, taking a cautious step towards her. It's me, Sarah, the real me. I know this is all impossible to believe, but... She cut me off, flinging herself into my arms with a sob. The feeling of her embrace, solid and real after so long in the twilight world, nearly brought me to my knees. As I held her, my eyes met those of my grandmother across the room. Eleanor nodded at me, a sad smile on her face as her form began to fade. You've won this battle, Jack, she said softly, but I fear the war is far from over. With those ominous words hanging in the air, she vanished, leaving me to face the aftermath of our confrontation. As I looked around at the others, still caught between worlds, at the shell-shocked expressions of those who had witnessed our battle, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The shadow selves were gone, at least for now. But their revelation had opened up a whole new world of questions and dangers. What were they really? Where had they come from? And most importantly, were there more of them out there waiting to strike? As I held Sarah close, feeling the warmth of her tears against my neck, I steeled myself for whatever might come next. We had won this round, but something told me our fight was far from over. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges lay ahead, I was determined to face them head on. After all, I had my life back, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone or anything take it from me again. The aftermath of our confrontation left an eerie silence hanging over the house. Sarah clung to me, her body trembling as she tried to process the impossible scene she had just witnessed. Around us, the few remaining shadow people flickered in and out of existence, caught between worlds. As the adrenaline of battle faded, a strange sensation began to creep over me. It started as a dull ache at the base of my skull, then spread like tendrils of ice through my mind. Suddenly I was bombarded with flashes of memory, vivid, painful, and utterly foreign. I staggered, nearly falling as the images assaulted me. Sarah caught me, her face etched with concern. "Jack? What's wrong?" I don't know," I gasped. "I'm seeing things, memories, but they're not mine. Or maybe they are. I don't understand." A familiar, chilling voice echoed through the room. "Oh, but they are yours, Jack. The memories you tried so hard to forget." The shadow self materialized before us, its form wavering but still present. It wore a grim smile, its eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and resignation. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, fighting against the flood of unfamiliar recollections. The shadow self's laugh was hollow. "You really don't remember, do you? How convenient. How human." More images flashed through my mind. A dark road, screeching tires, the sickening crunch of metal on metal. A young woman's face, bloodied and lifeless, staring accusingly through a shattered windshield. "No," I whispered, my knees buckling. That can't be real." "Oh, but it is," the shadow self said, its voice almost gentle. 5 years ago, you'd had a few drinks at a party. You thought you were fine to drive. You weren't." Sarah looked between us, confusion and fear warring on her face. "Jack, what is it talking about?" I couldn't answer her. I was lost in the torrent of recovered memories, the accident, the panic, the decision to flee the scene, leaving that poor girl to die alone on that dark road. "I created you," I realized, horror dawning as the pieces fell into place. That night, the guilt, the shame. I couldn't face it. So I buried it deep, locked it away in the darkest corners of my mind. The shadow self nodded, and in doing so, you gave me life. I am the embodiment of your darkest secret, your deepest shame, the part of yourself you couldn't bear to face. Sarah took a step back, her eyes wide. "Jack, is this true? Did you kill someone?" The pain in her voice was like a physical blow. I wanted to deny it, to tell her it was all some cruel trick. But I couldn't. The memories were too vivid, too real. "I didn't mean to," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "It was an accident. I was young and stupid and scared. I convinced myself it wasn't real, that it was just a bad dream." The shadow self's form seemed to solidify as I spoke, feeding off the emotions roiling through me. "And in denying your actions, you gave me power. I grew stronger, nurtured by your guilt and fear until I was able to push you out and take your place." I looked around at the other shadow people, still flickering in and out of reality. But what about them? Their shadow selves? Are they all born from repressed trauma too? "In a way," the shadow self replied. "Every human carries darkness within them, secrets, shames, fears they can't face. We are born from those hidden places, given form by your denial and repression." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time I had thought we were fighting against some external threat, some alien invasion. But the truth was far more terrifying. We had created our own destroyers. "So what now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You've revealed the truth. Is this where you destroy me for good?" To my surprise, the shadow self shook its head. "No, Jack. I'm tired of this existence. Tired of being the receptacle for your darkest impulses and hidden shames. I want to be free." "Free?" I echoed, not understanding. The shadow self's form wavered, becoming more transparent. "I'm offering you a deal. I will leave, dissolve back into the ether from which I came. But in exchange, I want to keep some of your memories. The darkest ones. The ones that gave me life." I froze, the implications of its offer sinking in. "You want me to give up my memories of the accident? To forget what I did?" "Isn't that what you wanted all along?" the shadow self countered. "To forget? To be free of the guilt?" Part of me, a larger part than I wanted to admit, was tempted. To be free of that burden, to no longer carry the weight of my worst mistake. It was an alluring prospect. But as I considered it, I realized the cost would be too high. Those memories, they're part of who I am. They shaped me, for better or worse. If I give them up, I'm not sure the person who's left would really be me. The shadow self's eyes narrowed. "Think carefully, Jack. This is your only chance at true freedom. To be unburdened by your past." Sarah, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally spoke up. "Jack, you can't seriously be considering this. What you did, it's terrible, but erasing it won't change what happened. That poor girl's family deserves justice." Her words cut through my indecision like a knife. She was right. Forgetting wouldn't change what I'd done. It would just be another form of running away. "No," I said firmly, meeting the shadow self's gaze. "No deal. Those memories are mine, dark as they are. I won't give them up." The shadow self's face contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you're giving up? What you're condemning yourself to?" As it spoke, its form began to change. Tendrils of darkness extended from it, reaching out towards the other flickering shadow people in the room. To my horror, they began to be absorbed into my shadow self's form. "What are you doing?" I cried out, reaching futilely towards Maria as she was pulled into the growing mass of shadows. "If you won't give me what I want willingly," the shadow self snarled, its voice distorting as it grew, "then I'll take it by force. I'll absorb every last one of these lost souls, and with their combined strength, I'll rip those memories from your mind myself." The room darkened as the shadow self swelled, absorbing more and more of the trapped victims. I could hear their screams, see their faces contorting in agony as they were consumed. "Jack, do something," Sarah pleaded, clutching my arm in terror. But what could I do? I had won our earlier confrontation by embracing my memories, my connections, but now those very things were being used against me. The shadow self was growing stronger with each absorbed victim, feeding off their pain and fear. As I stood there, frozen in indecision, I realized that this was more than just a battle for my own soul. The shadow self, in its desperate bid for freedom, was destroying the very people I had fought so hard to save. If I didn't find a way to stop it, everyone, Maria, the other victims, maybe even Sarah, would be lost. The shadow self, now a towering mass of writhing darkness, fixed its gaze on me. 100 voices spoke as one, a cacophony of pain and rage. "Last chance, Jack. Give us what we want, or watch as we tear your world apart." Time seemed to slow as I grappled with the impossible choice before me. Could I sacrifice my own identity, my own past, to save others? Or was there another way, a path I hadn't yet seen? As the shadow self loomed over us, poised to strike, I knew I had only moments to decide. The fate of not just myself, but all those trapped souls, hung in the balance. The shadow self loomed over us, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to consume all light in the room. Sarah clung to me, her eyes wide with terror, as she watched the impossible scene unfold. The screams of the absorbed victims echoed in my ears, a cacophony of pain and fear that threatened to drive me mad. Time seemed to slow as I grappled with the impossible choice before me. give up my memories, my very identity, or watch as this monstrous creation tore apart everything and everyone I loved. There had to be another way, a solution I hadn't yet seen. And then, in a moment of clarity that felt almost like divine inspiration, I understood what I had to do. "I know how to stop this," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the shadow self's roaring. Sarah looked at me, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "How?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I have to embrace it. All of it. The darkness, the pain, the guilt, everything I've been running from." "Jack, no," Sarah cried, gripping my arm tighter. "You can't. It'll destroy you." But I knew it was the only way. I gently disentangled myself from her grasp and took a step towards the looming shadow self. "You want my memories," I called out, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You want to be free? Then take them. Take all of it. But not just the darkness, everything, the good, the bad, the joy, the pain, all of it." The shadow self paused in its assault, its amorphous form rippling with confusion. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done running," I declared. "I'm done hiding from the parts of myself I don't want to face. You were born from my denial, my refusal to confront my own actions. But that ends now." I took another step forward, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I killed that girl. I ran away. I buried the memory so deep I convinced myself it never happened. And in doing so, I created you. But you're not some separate entity. You're me. The darkest, most shameful parts of me, but still me. The shadow self's form began to waver, its edges becoming less defined. "No," it growled, but there was uncertainty in its voice now. "We are separate. We are evolution. We are—" "You're nothing but a manifestation of my own guilt and fear," I interrupted. "And it's time for us to become whole again." With those words, I closed my eyes and opened my mind. I let down every mental barrier I had ever erected, every wall I had built to protect myself from painful truths. And I invited the shadow self in. The sensation was indescribable. It felt like ice and fire coursing through my veins, like being torn apart and stitched back together all at once. Every memory, every emotion I had ever repressed came flooding back in a torrent of sensation. I saw the accident again, in vivid, excruciating detail. The fear, the panic, the sickening crunch of metal, the girl's face, frozen in a silent scream. But this time, I didn't run from it. I faced it head-on, acknowledging my actions and the consequences that followed. But it wasn't just the darkness that returned. I relived every moment of joy, every triumph, every act of kindness I had ever performed. The first time I kissed Sarah, the day I graduated college, the moment I decided to become a better person after the accident. All of it, the good and the bad, came rushing back. The house began to shake, reality itself seeming to bend and warp around us. I could hear Sarah screaming my name, but it sounded distant, as if coming from the end of a long tunnel. The shadow self's form began to dissipate, breaking apart into wisps of darkness that swirled around me like a cyclone. "What's happening?" I heard it cry out, its voice a mixture of fear and awe. "We're becoming whole," I answered, though I wasn't sure if I spoke the words aloud or merely thought them. The process felt like it lasted an eternity and no time at all. I was dimly aware of the other absorbed victims being released, their forms coalescing back into solidity as the shadow self lost its grip on them. Maria, my grandmother Eleanor, and the others I had fought alongside. All of them returned to the physical world as the shadow self's power waned. And then, suddenly, it was over. The shaking stopped, the darkness receded, and I found myself on my knees in the middle of the living room. Sarah was at my side in an instant, her hands fluttering over me as if afraid to touch. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. Are you okay?" I opened my eyes slowly, blinking as the world came back into focus. I think so," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure they were true. I felt different, changed in ways I couldn't quite articulate. It was as if I was seeing the world through new eyes, experiencing everything with an intensity I had never known before. Slowly, I got to my feet, Sarah supporting me as I swayed slightly. The others in the room, Maria, Eleanor, the freed victims, all watched me with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "What happened?" Maria asked, her form now fully solid and real. "The shadow selves. They're gone. All of them." I nodded, trying to find the words to explain. "They were never separate entities," I said slowly. "They were parts of ourselves we had denied, repressed. By accepting them, integrating them, we made ourselves whole again." Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes searching my face. "But at what cost, Jack? You took in so much darkness. Are you still you?" It was a question I wasn't sure how to answer. I felt like myself, but also more, as if I had access to parts of my psyche that had been locked away for years. "I need to see," I murmured, more to myself than to the others. I stumbled towards the hallway, where I knew a full-length mirror hung on the wall. As I stood before the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. My features were the same, and yet different. My eyes seemed to hold depths I had never seen before, shadows and light swirling in their depths. And then, for just a moment, I saw it. A flicker of the shadow self, superimposed over my own reflection. But it wasn't separate, wasn't trying to take control. It was simply there, a part of me, integrated into my being. "Oh God," I whispered, understanding dawning with horrifying clarity. "What have I done?" Sarah appeared behind me in the mirror, her face etched with concern. "Jack, talk to me. What's wrong?" I turned to face her, struggling to find the words to explain. "I'm me," I said slowly, "but I'm also everything. Every dark thought, every shameful impulse, every moment of weakness or cruelty. It's all here now, a part of me." Her eyes widened as she began to understand. "But that's good, isn't it? You're whole now. You've faced your demons." I shook my head, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "You don't understand. The shadow selves. They were right about one thing, this is evolution, but not in the way they thought." I looked around at the others, all watching me with a mixture of fear and fascination. "We've opened a door that can't be closed," I continued. "By integrating our shadows, we've become more than human, more than we were ever meant to be." Maria stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Jack?" I met her gaze, seeing the same swirling depths in her eyes that I now saw in my own. "I'm saying that this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We've taken the first step on a path that will change everything." As the words left my mouth, I felt a shudder run through me. The full implications of what we had done, what we had become, were only just starting to sink in. We had defeated the shadow selves, yes, but in doing so, we had unleashed something far more terrifying. We had become something new, something that straddled the line between human and other. And as I looked at my reflection once more, seeing both myself and the shadow swirling beneath the surface, I understood that the real horror had only just begun. The question now wasn't whether we could go back to our normal lives. It was whether anything would ever be normal again. And deep down in the newly awakened corners of my psyche, I feared I already knew the answer. I've always been a morning person, but on that particular Tuesday I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head throbbed, and my limbs felt heavy, as if I'd spent the night swimming through molasses. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Rolling over, I squinted at the alarm clock on my nightstand. 6:58 a.m., 2 minutes before it was set to go off. With a groan, I reached out and silenced it preemptively, then swung my legs over the side of the bed. "Come on, Jack," I muttered to myself. "Get it together." As I stood up, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I stumbled, catching myself on the dresser. For a moment the room spun, and I could have sworn I saw a shadow flicker in the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. Shaking my head, I made my way to the bathroom. The cold tiles under my feet helped ground me, but that nagging feeling of wrongness persisted. I flicked on the light, wincing at the sudden brightness, and shuffled over to the sink. That's when I saw it. Or rather, that's when I saw me. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for a split second it seemed off, like it had moved a fraction of a second too late. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. "You're losing it, old man." I chuckled nervously to myself. But as I lowered my hands and looked again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My reflection stared back at me, mimicking my movements as it should, but there was something in its eyes. A glint of, what? Amusement? Malice? I leaned in closer, my nose almost touching the glass. And then it happened. I blinked, and in that infinitesimal moment, I swear I saw my reflection smirk. A cold, cruel twist of the lips that sent a shiver down my spine. Jerking back, I stumbled against the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell?" I gasped. But when I looked again, my reflection was normal. Just a tired, middle-aged man with tousled hair and bags under his eyes. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to shake off the creeping unease that had settled over me. "Get a grip, Jack," I told my reflection sternly. "You're just tired, maybe coming down with something." As I went through the motions of my morning routine, shower, shave, teeth, I couldn't help but glance nervously at the mirror every few seconds. But nothing out of the ordinary happened. By the time I was dressed and heading downstairs for coffee, I had almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Almost. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork at the office. But no matter how hard I tried to focus, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every reflective surface, computer screens, windows, even the polished chrome of the water cooler, seemed to hold a threat. More than once I caught myself flinching away from my own reflection. "You okay, Jack?" My colleague Sarah asked during our lunch break. "You seem a bit jumpy today." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well last night. Probably too much caffeine." She nodded sympathetically, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Was I really that obvious? As the day wore on, my paranoia grew. I started avoiding reflective surfaces altogether, taking the stairs instead of the elevator to avoid seeing myself in its mirrored walls. By the time I left work, I was a bundle of nerves, constantly looking over my shoulder. The drive home was a nightmare. Every car window, every shop front seemed to hold a distorted version of myself, leering at me as I passed. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, refusing to look at the rearview mirror. When I finally made it home, I practically ran inside, slamming the door behind me and leaning against it, breathing heavily. "This is ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "You're a grown man, for God's sake, pull yourself together." But as I walked into the living room, my eyes were drawn to the large mirror hanging over the fireplace, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My reflection was there, but it wasn't mimicking my movements. It stood still, staring at me with a predatory grin that stretched impossibly wide. As I watched in horror, it raised one hand and pressed it against the glass as if trying to push through. I stumbled backward, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on the floor. When I looked up again, my reflection was back to normal, mirroring my sprawled position. "I'm losing my mind," I whispered, my voice shaking. "This can't be real." That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that terrible grin, those cold eyes that were mine but not mine. I tossed and turned, tangling myself in the sheets, my mind racing with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. When I finally drifted off in the early hours of the morning, my dreams were filled with shattering mirrors and a familiar face laughing at me from the shards. In the dream, I was running down an endless hallway lined with mirrors, each one showing a slightly different version of myself. Some sneered, some pleaded, some screamed silently. But they all reached for me, their hands pressing against the glass, cracks spreading from their fingertips. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat, the echo of breaking glass still ringing in my ears. The dim light of dawn was just starting to filter through the curtains. For a moment, I lay there, trying to calm my racing heart. It was just a dream, I told myself firmly. Just a dream brought on by too much stress and an overactive imagination. But as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, I couldn't help but wonder if it was really that simple. The events of the previous day came flooding back, and with them, the fear. Slowly, reluctantly, I made my way to the bathroom. My hand hesitated on the doorknob, trembling slightly. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The mirror loomed before me, innocuous in the soft morning light. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I gazed at my reflection, everything seemed normal. Just me, looking tired and scared. But then I saw it. A flicker of something in my reflected eyes. A coldness. A hunger that didn't belong there. And as I watched, frozen in horror, my reflection's lips curled into that terrible smirk I remembered from my dreams. I turned to run, but my reflection didn't follow. It stayed there, grinning at me from the mirror, its eyes gleaming with malevolent triumph. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever was in that mirror, it wasn't me. As I stood outside the bathroom door, my hand trembling on the knob, I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. The events of yesterday replayed in my mind, each memory more terrifying than the last. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You can do this, Jack," I whispered, my voice quavering. "It's just a mirror. Just your reflection." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. Whatever was on the other side of that glass, it wasn't me. Not anymore. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The bathroom was bathed in the soft, gray light of early morning, making everything look slightly unreal. The mirror loomed before me, its surface smooth and innocent-looking. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that yesterday had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. Then I saw my reflection. I stood frozen in the doorway, but the figure in the mirror didn't move. It just stood there, staring at me with eyes that were mine but not mine. Cold, calculating, hungry. "This isn't real," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. "When I open my eyes, everything will be normal." But when I looked again, nothing had changed. My reflection remained motionless, its gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Swallowing hard, I took a step forward. The reflection didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. By the time I reached the sink, I was shaking so badly I had to grip the porcelain to stay upright. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The reflection's lips didn't move, but I swear I heard a voice in my head, cold and amused. "I'm you, Jack, the real you." I shook my head violently. "No, you're not me. You can't be." A smile spread across the reflection's face, but it wasn't my smile. It was too wide, too knowing. "Oh, but I am. I'm everything you've kept hidden, everything you've been too afraid to be." As if in a trance, I found myself reaching out towards the mirror. My fingertips hovered just inches from the glass. In the mirror, my reflection's hand moved to meet mine. "That's it," the voice in my head coaxed. "Let me out, Jack. Let me show you what you could be." Our fingertips were almost touching now, separated only by the thin barrier of the mirror. I could feel a strange energy pulsing from the glass, like static electricity but stronger, more alive. And then, just as our fingers were about to meet, the reflection grinned. I recoiled in horror. The mouth that should have been mine was filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth like a shark's. The eyes that had been cold before now blazed with an inhuman hunger. "What's wrong, Jack?" The thing in the mirror taunted, its voice no longer in my head but coming from its mouth, distorted and wrong. "Don't you want to shake hands with yourself?" I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. "You're not me," I gasped. You're something else." The reflection laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "I'm what you could be, Jack. What you should be, and I'm tired of waiting." To my horror, the thing in the mirror began to move. Not mirroring my movements, but independently. It placed its hands against the glass and pushed. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and for a moment, I thought I saw a hand start to emerge. Panic exploded in my chest. "No!" I shouted, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy ceramic soap dish, and hurling it at the mirror. The dish hit the glass with a resounding crack, but instead of shattering, the mirror seemed to absorb the impact. The ripples intensified, and now I could definitely see fingers pushing through like a membrane stretching to its breaking point. I turned and ran, slamming the bathroom door behind me. I could hear laughter echoing from inside, growing louder and more distorted by the second. Gasping for breath, I leaned against the hallway wall, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It defied everything I knew about reality. And yet, I couldn't deny what I'd seen. "Think, Jack, think," I muttered to myself. "What do you do when your reflection tries to murder you?" The answer, of course, was that there was no answer. This wasn't a situation covered in any self-help book or survival guide. I needed help. But who could I possibly turn to? Who would believe me? As if in answer to my unspoken question, my phone rang, making me jump. With shaking hands, I pulled it from my pocket. The caller ID showed it was Sarah from work. For a moment I hesitated. Then, desperation overriding my fear of sounding insane, I answered. "Jack, where are you?" Sarah's voice came through, tinged with concern. "The meeting started 10 minutes ago." "Meeting? What meeting?" And then I remembered. The big presentation to the board, the one I'd spent weeks preparing for. I'm not feeling well," I managed to croak out. "I don't think I can make it in today." There was a pause on the other end. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was softer, worried. "Jack, what's going on? You've been acting strange lately. Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth to lie, to say everything was fine. But what came out instead was a choked sob. "Sarah, I think I'm losing my mind." "What do you mean?" she asked, alarm clear in her voice. I took a deep breath. "If I tell you something crazy, do you promise not to hang up?" "Of course," she said immediately. "You're scaring me, Jack. What's happening?" So I told her. Everything. The strange feelings. The mirror. The thing that looked like me but wasn't. As I spoke, I kept glancing nervously at the bathroom door, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I waited, my heart in my throat, certain that Sarah was going to laugh or worse, hang up. Finally, she spoke. "Jack, I don't know what to say. This sounds insane," I finished for her. "I know. But Sarah, I swear to you, it's real. I'm not making this up." Another pause. Then, "Okay. Okay. I believe you." Relief washed over me so strongly I nearly collapsed. "You do? Well, I believe that you believe it," she said carefully. "And that's enough for now. Listen, don't do anything. I'm coming over." "No," I shouted, startling myself with the volume. More quietly, I added, "No, it's not safe. I don't know what this thing is capable of." "Then we'll figure it out together," Sarah insisted. "You shouldn't be alone right now. I'm on my way." Before I could protest further, she had hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, a mix of relief and dread swirling in my stomach. A loud thump from the bathroom made me jump. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, or like something was trying to break through. I backed away from the door, my eyes fixed on the handle. It began to turn, slowly, agonizingly, slowly. "Oh God," I whispered. "What have I done?" As the door began to open, I turned and ran for the stairs. Behind me, I heard a voice that was mine but not mine call out. "You can't run from yourself, Jack. Sooner or later you'll have to face me." I didn't look back. I just ran, praying that Sarah would arrive soon, and that when she did, she'd be ready for what we were about to face. Because one thing was certain. The thing in the mirror wasn't going to stay there much longer, and when it got out, everything would change. I stood at the foot of the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest as I heard the bathroom door creak open upstairs. The house was eerily silent, save for the soft padding of footsteps drawing nearer. My reflection, no, that thing that looked like me, was coming. "Sarah, where are you?" I whispered desperately, glancing at my phone. No messages, no calls. She should have been here by now. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat as I saw myself, or rather, the thing wearing my face, standing there, grinning down at me with that impossible shark-toothed smile. "Hello, Jack," it said, its voice a distorted version of my own. "Aren't you going to welcome me properly?" I backed away, my voice shaking as I spoke. "You're not real. You can't be real." It laughed, a chilling sound that seemed to reverberate through the entire house. "Oh, I'm very real, and I'm about to become even more so." With inhuman speed, it rushed down the stairs. I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if I was rooted to the spot, unable to do anything but watch in horror as my doppelganger approached. "What's wrong, Jack?" it taunted, now standing mere inches from me. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you finally realizing that resistance is futile?" I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything, but my body refused to obey. The thing reached out, its hand stopping just short of my face. As I watched, its fingers began to ripple and distort like they were made of liquid. "It's time, Jack," it said, its voice now a whisper. "Time for us to trade places." Suddenly, the front door burst open. Sarah rushed in, her eyes wide with panic. "Jack, I'm here, what's—" She froze as she took in the scene before her. Me, paralyzed with fear, facing an exact duplicate of myself. "Sarah, run!" I managed to choke out. It's not me, it's—" But before I could finish, the thing lunged at me, its hand now completely fluid pressed against my chest. I felt a sensation like ice-cold water flooding through my veins. The world around me began to ripple and distort. "Jack!" Sarah screamed, rushing forward. I tried to reach out to her, but my hand passed right through her outstretched fingers. The last thing I saw was her horrified face as the world dissolved into a swirling vortex of color and sound. Then darkness. When I opened my eyes, everything was wrong. The world looked inverted somehow, as if I was seeing it through a warped lens. I was still in my living room, but it wasn't my living room. Everything was backwards, and there was a strange, silvery sheen to everything. "No," I whispered, my voice sounding distant and echoing. "No, no, no." I spun around, and there it was, the mirror. But from this side, it looked like a window into my world. And through that window I saw myself, the other me, standing in my living room, comforting a distraught Sarah. "It's okay," I heard it say in my voice. "I'm fine now. Whatever that was, it's gone." But there were two of you," Sarah said, her voice muffled as if coming from underwater. "I saw it, Jack. What's going on?" The thing wearing my face smiled reassuringly. "I think I had some kind of episode. Stress, maybe, or lack of sleep. But I'm feeling much better now. Thank you for coming." I pounded on the mirror, screaming, "Sarah! Sarah, don't listen to it. I'm here. I'm trapped." But they couldn't hear me. Sarah looked at the mirror, her brow furrowed in confusion, but her eyes passed right over me as if I wasn't there. "Did you hear something?" she asked. My doppelganger shook its head. "No, nothing. Come on, let's sit down. I'll explain everything." I watched helplessly as it led Sarah to the couch, its arm around her shoulders in a perfect imitation of my mannerisms. I kept shouting, kept pounding on the mirror, but it was useless. I was trapped on the other side, a silent observer in a world of reflections. As the initial shock began to wear off, I started to take in my surroundings. This mirror world was a twisted version of my home. Everything was backwards, and there was a constant faint rippling effect, as if I was underwater. The air felt thick and cold, and breathing was difficult. I wandered through the house, my mind reeling. Every mirror I passed showed me the real world, where my imposter was smoothly taking over my life. I watched as it reassured Sarah, made phone calls to apologize for missing work, even fed my cat, all while wearing my face, speaking with my voice. How is this possible? I muttered to myself, running my hands through my hair in frustration. How do I get back? As if in answer, I heard a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably there. You can't. I spun around, searching for the source of the voice. Who's there? Show yourself. From the shadows of what should have been my kitchen, a figure emerged. It was an old man, his face lined with age and sorrow. But what struck me most were his eyes. They seemed to shift and swirl, like pools of mercury. Who are you? I demanded. What is this place? The old man sighed, a sound full of centuries of weariness. This is the other side, as we call it. The world behind every mirror, every reflection, and you, my friend, are its newest resident. I shook my head, refusing to accept his words. No, this is impossible. I need to get back. That thing stole my life. Ah, the old man said, nodding sadly. You've encountered one of them. The reflections that aren't content to merely mimic, but yearn to live. What are you talking about? What are they? The old man gestured around us. We are not the first to be trapped here, Jack. This world has existed as long as the first reflection appeared in still water. And sometimes, very rarely, the reflections develop a will of their own, a hunger to be more than mere images. I felt a chill run down my spine. Are you saying that thing was never really my reflection? That it was always something else just waiting? He nodded gravely. Precisely. And now it has what it wanted, your place in the real world. But there has to be a way back, I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. I can't just stay here while that thing lives my life. The old man placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch feeling oddly insubstantial. I'm sorry, Jack. Many have tried to return. None have succeeded. I pulled away from him, anger replacing my fear. Well, I'm going to be the first. I don't care what it takes. I'm getting my life back. A small, sad smile played on the old man's lips. Your determination is admirable. Perhaps you will find a way where others have failed. But be warned, the path you seek is fraught with dangers beyond your imagination. I squared my shoulders, looking back at the mirror that showed my living room, where the imposter was now laughing with Sarah over a cup of coffee. I don't care about the dangers. That's my life it's stealing, and I'm going to take it back. The old man nodded slowly. Very well. If you're determined to try, there are things you must learn. The rules of this world are different from the one you knew. Master them, and you might stand a chance. As he began to explain the strange physics of the mirror world, I half listened, my eyes fixed on the scene in my living room. I watched as my doppelganger perfectly imitated my mannerisms, my speech patterns, even the way I absently ran my hand through my hair when I was thinking. I'm coming for you, I whispered, pressing my hand against the cold, unyielding surface of the mirror. Whatever you are, wherever you came from, I'm going to find a way back. And when I do, I'll make you regret ever stepping out of this mirror. The thing wearing my face paused for a moment, a flicker of something, awareness, concern, passing over its features. It turned towards the mirror, its eyes seeming to meet mine for a split second. And then it smiled. A subtle knowing smile that Sarah couldn't see. A smile that said, "Try your best. You'll fail." I pulled my hand back from the mirror, clenching it into a fist. The game was on, and I was determined to win no matter the cost. I pressed my hands against the cold, unyielding surface of the mirror, watching helplessly as the imposter wearing my face moved through my life with unsettling ease. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed play, only I was no longer the lead actor. I was relegated to a silent, invisible spectator. "Good morning, honey," my wife Karen said as she entered the kitchen. The thing that looked like me smiled warmly, setting down the newspaper it had been pretending to read. "Morning, beautiful," it replied, its imitation of my voice flawless. "Coffee?" I pounded on the glass, my voice a silent scream. "Karen, it's not me. Can't you see?" But of course she couldn't. To her and to everyone else in my world, the creature on the other side of the mirror was Jack Thompson, loving husband, dedicated father, and hard-working accountant. Days passed, blending into an agonizing blur. I watched as the imposter attended my meetings at work, laughed with my colleagues, and even gave a presentation I had spent weeks preparing. Sarah, my co-worker, who had witnessed my struggle with the mirror entity, seemed to have forgotten all about the incident. The creature had somehow managed to convince her it was all a stress-induced hallucination. "I can't believe how well the Henderson account presentation went," Sarah gushed over lunch one day. "You really knocked it out of the park, Jack." The imposter grinned, shrugging modestly. "Just did my homework, that's all." I gritted my teeth, seething with frustration. "That was my work, you parasite," I hissed, knowing full well it couldn't hear me. But the truly maddening part was how it handled my personal life. It remembered anniversaries I often forgot, brought flowers home to Karen for no reason, and even took my son, Tommy, fishing, something I had been promising to do for months but never found the time. "Dad, did you see that?" Tommy exclaimed, his face beaming as he reeled in a good-sized trout. "I caught one." The thing wearing my face ruffled Tommy's hair affectionately. "That's my boy. I knew you had it in you." I slumped against the mirror, a sob catching in my throat. "I should be there," I whispered. "That should be me." As I watched my life unfold without me, I began to notice changes in myself. My reflection in the mirror world was becoming fainter, more translucent. I could see the outlines of objects through my hands, and my voice, though still inaudible to the real world, was becoming weaker even to my own ears. Panic gripped me. Was I fading away? Would I simply cease to exist, forgotten by everyone I loved, replaced by this perfect imposter? The old man I had met when I first arrived in this mirror dimension appeared beside me, his mercury eyes full of sympathy. "You're fading," he said softly. "It happens to all of us eventually. The longer we stay here, the less real we become." I turned to him, desperation clear in my voice. "There has to be a way to stop it, to get back." He shook his head sadly. "I'm sorry, Jack. I've been here for, well, I've lost count of the years. There is no way back. But I refuse to accept that. I spend every waking moment searching for a way out, testing the boundaries of this mirror world, looking for any weakness, any flaw in its construction. And then just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw it. A tiny imperfection in the corner of the living room mirror. A crack, so small it was barely visible, but definitely there. "Look," I exclaimed, pointing it out to the old man. "Do you see that?" He squinted, leaning in close. Yes, I do see something. But Jack, even if it is a crack, what do you think you can do?" I pressed my finger against the crack, feeling a surge of hope for the first time in days. "I don't know yet, but it's something. It's a start." Over the next few days, I focused all my energy on that tiny crack. I talked to it, willed it to grow, even tried to widen it with my increasingly insubstantial hands. And to my amazement, it seemed to be working. The crack was growing, slowly but surely. Meanwhile, the imposter continued its flawless performance in my world. It excelled at my job, earning praise from my boss and respect from my colleagues. It was the perfect husband to Karen, remembering every little detail about her day and surprising her with thoughtful gestures. And to Tommy, it was the father I had always wanted to be but never quite managed. Patient, attentive, and always there. One evening, as I watched the imposter tuck Tommy into bed, I heard my son say something that broke my heart. "Dad?" Tommy mumbled sleepily. "I'm really glad you're not working so much anymore. I like it when you're home." The creature smiled, smoothing Tommy's hair. "I like it too, buddy. Sweet dreams." As it turned off the light and closed the door, I saw something in its eyes. A flicker of genuine emotion. Was it possible that this thing, this mirror entity, was capable of real feelings? I shook my head, banishing the thought. It didn't matter if it could feel. It had stolen my life, and I was going to take it back. The crack in the mirror continued to grow, and with it, my hope. But as it widened, I began to notice strange phenomena in both worlds. Objects would momentarily flicker, appearing reversed or distorted. Sometimes I could swear I heard echoes of sounds from my world, growing louder as the crack expanded. The old man watched these developments with growing concern. "Jack," he said one day, his voice grave, "I fear you may be destabilizing the barrier between our worlds. The consequences could be catastrophic." I turned to him, my jaw set stubbornly. "I don't care. I'm getting my life back, whatever it takes." He sighed heavily. "And what of the cost? What if your actions tear apart the fabric of both realities?" I hesitated, considering his words, but then I caught sight of the imposter in the mirror, laughing with Karen as they prepared dinner together. My resolve hardened. "It's a risk I'm willing to take," I said firmly. As the days wore on, I grew weaker, more transparent, but the crack in the mirror continued to widen. I could now fit my hand through it, feeling the strangest sensation as it passed from one reality to another. And then, on what I estimated to be my 10th day in the mirror world, something extraordinary happened. As the imposter passed by the living room mirror, it suddenly froze, its eyes widening in shock. For the first time since it had taken my place, it looked directly at me. "You," it hissed, its perfect mask slipping to reveal something alien and furious beneath. "What have you done?" I stood my ground, meeting its gaze defiantly. "I'm taking back what's mine," I declared. The creature snarled, pressing its hand against the mirror. I felt a surge of energy, a pull that threatened to drag me further into the mirror world. But I resisted, pushing back with all my might. "You don't belong there," I growled. "That's my life, my family, and I'm coming to reclaim it." For a moment we were locked in a silent battle of wills, the barrier between our worlds trembling under the strain. Then, abruptly, the creature pulled back, its face once again a perfect mask of my features. "Karen?" it called out, its voice steady despite the rage I had seen in its eyes moments before. "I think we need to get this mirror replaced. It's looking a bit cracked." As it turned away, it cast one last look at me. A look that promised this was far from over. I slumped against the mirror, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, the imposter had acknowledged my existence. It knew I was fighting back. "I'm coming," I whispered, pressing my hand against the widening crack. "Just hold on a little longer." As I ventured deeper into the mirror world, the surroundings became increasingly surreal. The familiar layout of my house stretched and warped, corridors extending into impossible lengths and rooms shifting in ways that defied physics. Everything was bathed in an eerie, silvery light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I wandered through this twisted reflection of my home, my fingertips trailing along walls that felt both solid and insubstantial. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely. "Is anyone there?" At first, there was no response. Then, gradually, I began to notice movement in the periphery of my vision. Shadowy figures flitted just out of sight, their forms indistinct and wavering. Please, I said, my voice cracking with desperation. I know you're there. I need help. Slowly, the figures began to emerge from the shadows. They were people, or at least they had been once. Now they were pale, translucent beings, their features blurred and their eyes sunken and hollow. They regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. One of them, a woman who might have been beautiful once, drifted towards me. You're new, she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to come from far away. How long have you been here? I'm not sure, I admitted. A few days, maybe? It's hard to keep track of time here. She nodded sadly. It gets harder. After a while, you stop trying to count the days. They all blur together in this endless twilight. As we talked, more of the trapped souls gathered around us. They shared their stories, tales of mirrors that suddenly became portals, of reflections that came to life and stole their existence. Each story was unique, yet terrifyingly similar to my own experience. But what are these things? I asked. These doppelgangers that take our place? An old man stepped forward, his form more solid than the others, his eyes gleaming with a knowledge that seemed both ancient and terrible. They are the reflections, he said, his voice resonating with authority. Entities as old as the first mirror, the first still pool of water that ever captured an image. But why do they do this? I pressed. Why steal our lives? The old man's expression grew grave. They feed on life, on experiences. For eons they were content to merely mimic, to reflect the world they saw. But some of them grew hungry for more. They wanted to live, truly live, not just imitate life. A chill ran down my spine as I processed this information. So the thing that took my place, it's not just copying me, it's consuming my life? Precisely, the old man nodded. It will live your life more fully than you ever did, savoring every moment, every sensation. And as it grows stronger, you will fade, becoming nothing more than a memory, a faint reflection yourself. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. I staggered, my form flickering momentarily. There has to be a way to stop it, I said, my voice hoarse, to get back to my world. The gathered souls exchanged glances, a mixture of pity and something else. Was it hope? In their eyes. The old man stepped closer, his mercury eyes boring into mine. There might be a way, he said slowly, but it is dangerous and few have ever succeeded. Tell me, I demanded, please, I'll do anything. He sighed heavily. The barrier between our world and yours is not absolute. There are weak points, places where the veil between realities thins. If you can find such a point, and if you have the will and the strength, you might be able to force your way back. But, he added, his tone warning, the reflection that took your place will fight you. It will not give up its stolen life easily, and if you fail, you risk being lost forever, adrift in the void between worlds. I absorbed this information, my mind racing. How do I find these weak points? They're not fixed, the old man explained. They shift and move, but they often manifest as imperfections in reflective surfaces, cracks in mirrors, ripples in still water. You've already found one, haven't you? The crack in your living room mirror. I nodded, remembering the small flaw I'd discovered. Yes, but it's so small. How can I use it to get back? Focus your will on it, he instructed. Pour all your desire, all your yearning for life into that crack. With enough effort, you might be able to widen it, to create a portal back to your world. The other souls listened intently, a spark of hope kindling in their hollow eyes. I realized that if I succeeded, I might be able to help them too. I'll do it, I said firmly. I'll find a way back and I'll stop these reflections. They can't be allowed to keep stealing lives. The old man placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm. Be careful, Jack. The path you're choosing is fraught with danger. The reflections have existed for millennia, and they will not be easily defeated. I met his gaze steadily. I understand. but I have to try. For my family. For everyone trapped here. And for everyone who might become a victim in the future. As I spoke these words, I felt a change come over me. My form seemed to solidify slightly, becoming less transparent. The other souls gasped, pointing at me in wonder. "What's happening?" I asked, looking down at my hands in amazement. The old man smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Your resolve, your determination, it strengthens you. In this world of reflections and shadows, will is everything. Remember that, Jack. Your belief in yourself, your desire to reclaim your life, these are your greatest weapons." Armed with this newfound knowledge and a sense of purpose, I bid farewell to the trapped souls, promising to return for them if I succeeded. As I made my way back to the living room mirror, I could feel their hopes and fears following me like a tangible force. Standing before the mirror, I placed my hand on the small crack, focusing all my will, all my desire to return home, into that tiny imperfection. To my amazement, I felt it respond, the crack widening ever so slightly under my touch. "I'm coming for you," I whispered, knowing that somewhere my doppelganger could hear me. "This isn't over." As if in response, I saw a flicker of movement in the mirror. For a brief moment, I locked eyes with my reflection, but it wasn't me staring back. It was the entity, its stolen face twisted in a snarl of defiance and fear. "You can't win," it hissed, its voice a distorted version of my own. "This life is mine now. You're nothing but a fading memory." I pressed harder against the crack, feeling it splinter further under my touch. "We'll see about that," I growled. The image in the mirror wavered, and then the entity was gone, replaced once again by the normal reflection of the empty living room. But I knew it had felt my efforts, knew that it was aware of the threat I posed. As I stepped back from the mirror, I felt a new sense of determination coursing through me. The path ahead would be difficult, perhaps even impossible. But I had to try. For my family, for the trapped souls in this twisted mirror world, and for myself. "I'm coming home," I vowed, my voice ringing with newfound strength. "And when I do, I'm going to end this, once and for all." With that promise echoing in the silvery air of the mirror world, I turned my focus to the task ahead. I stood before the living room mirror, my hand pressed against the slowly widening crack. Concentrating hard, I focused on manipulating the reflection. At first nothing happened, but then I saw a slight ripple like a stone dropped in still water. "Come on," I muttered, gritting my teeth with effort. "Just a little more." Suddenly the reflection wavered, and for a brief moment I saw my own image superimposed over the room beyond. It was working. I was learning to control this strange mirror world. Days passed as I practiced this new skill. I discovered I could create small distortions in reflective surfaces, a ripple here, a flicker there. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I hoped that someone, anyone, might notice these anomalies and realize something was amiss. One afternoon, as I was attempting to manipulate the hallway mirror, I saw her. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, walked past the mirror and then stopped, her eyes widening as she noticed the strange ripple effect I had created. "Whoa," she breathed, leaning in close to examine the mirror. "That's so cool." I felt a surge of hope. This was my chance. Concentrating hard, I managed to form words in the condensation on the mirror's surface. "Help me." The girl gasped, stumbling backward. "Mom," she called out, her voice trembling. "Mom, come quick, there's something weird happening with the mirror." I heard footsteps approaching, and a moment later, a woman, my neighbor, Susan, appeared in the mirror's reflection. "What is it, Lily?" she asked, sounding concerned. Lily pointed at the mirror excitedly. "Look, the words just appeared by themselves." Susan peered at the mirror, frowning. "Honey, I don't see anything. Are you sure you're not imagining things?" My heart sank as I realized the words had already faded, but Lily shook her head stubbornly. "I'm not making it up, Mom. I really saw it." Susan sighed, patting her daughter's shoulder. "Okay, sweetie. I believe that you think you saw something. But mirrors don't write messages on their own. Come on, let's go have some lunch. As they walked away, I slumped against the mirror in frustration. But then I heard Lily's voice, quiet but determined. I know what I saw, and I'm going to figure out what's going on. Over the next few days, I noticed Lily spending more and more time near the mirrors in her house. She would sit for hours watching intently, occasionally reaching out to touch the glass. I redoubled my efforts trying to create more noticeable distortions whenever she was around. Finally, my persistence paid off. One evening, as Lily sat cross-legged in front of her bedroom mirror, I managed to form another message. "I'm trapped, help." Lily's eyes went wide. "I knew it," she whispered excitedly. "Who are you? How can I help?" Frantically, I tried to respond, but maintaining the words was exhausting. I only managed to add, "Jack, next door." Recognition dawned on Lily's face. "Mr. Thompson, but you're not trapped. I saw you yesterday taking out the trash." I felt a chill run down my spine. The entity was still perfectly mimicking my life, fooling everyone. How could I make Lily understand? Before I could try to communicate further, I felt a sudden, malevolent presence behind me. Spinning around, I saw the old man from before, his mercury eyes wide with fear. "Run!" he hissed. "It's coming." I didn't need to ask what it was. I could feel the entity's rage rippling through the mirror world, distorting everything around us. I cast one last, desperate look at Lily before fleeing into the twisted corridors of the mirror realm. As I ran, I caught glimpses of other trapped souls scattering in terror. The entity's fury was affecting the entire mirror world, causing tremors that shook the very fabric of this strange reality. I ducked into a warped version of my bedroom, trying to catch my breath. Through the mirror, I could see the entity, wearing my face, pacing angrily in the real world. "You can't hide from me," it snarled, its voice a distorted version of my own. "This is my world now, and you're nothing but a fading memory." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. How could I fight something that seemed to have power over this entire realm? Suddenly, I heard a commotion from the other side of the mirror. Lily had burst into my bedroom, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mr. Thompson," she exclaimed, "I got your message. What's going on? How can I help?" The entity spun around, its stolen face twisting into a mask of surprise and anger. For a moment, its perfect mimicry slipped, revealing something inhuman beneath. Lily stumbled backward, her excitement turning to fear. You're not Mr. Thompson," she whispered. The entity quickly composed itself, forcing its features back into a facsimile of my friendly neighbor expression. "Lily, honey, what are you talking about? Of course it's me. You must have had a bad dream or something." But Lily wasn't buying it. She shook her head vigorously. "No, I saw the real Mr. Thompson. He's trapped somewhere, isn't he? And you're something else." The entity's facade cracked again, a snarl escaping its lips. It took a menacing step toward Lily. "You're a clever little girl," it growled. "Too clever for your own good." I couldn't stand by and watch. Summoning every ounce of will I possessed, I slammed my fists against the mirror, causing it to shake violently in its frame. The entity whirled around, its eyes locking onto mine through the glass. In that moment of distraction, Lily bolted from the room. "This isn't over," the entity hissed at me before rushing after Lily. I slumped against the mirror, exhausted but relieved. Lily had gotten away, and more importantly, she knew the truth now. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As I caught my breath, I became aware of whispers echoing through the mirror world. Following the sound, I found myself in a twisted version of my living room. There, gathered around the cracked mirror, were several shadowy figures, more entities like the one that had stolen my life. "The barrier weakens," one of them rasped, its form flickering between various stolen faces. "Soon, we will all cross over." "Yes," another agreed, its voice a chilling chorus of multiple tones. The human's efforts have unintentionally created more weak points. We must be ready to seize our chance. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling from this new information. It wasn't just my doppelganger. There was an entire army of these things, waiting to invade the real world and steal more lives. As I turned to flee, my foot caught on a warped floorboard. I crashed to the ground, the noise alerting the gathered entities to my presence. "The resistant one of them hissed. "Capture him." I scrambled to my feet and ran, ducking through impossible geometries and shifting corridors. Behind me, I could hear the entities in pursuit, their forms rippling through the mirrors like living mercury. Finally, I found myself back in the twisted version of my bedroom. The old man was there, his eyes wide with urgency. "Quick," he said, gesturing to a small hand mirror on the dresser. "Use this. It's not connected to your world. They won't be able to follow you through it." Without hesitation, I dove for the mirror. As I felt myself being pulled into its depths, I heard the old man's voice one last time. "Remember, Jack, your will is your strongest weapon here. Don't let them break it." Then I was through, tumbling into a new section of the mirror world, one I hadn't seen before. As I got to my feet, I could hear the frustrated howls of the entities fading in the distance. I leaned against a warped wall, trying to process everything that had happened. Lily knew the truth now, but she was just a child. How could she help? And what about these other entities preparing to invade my world? One thing was clear. The stakes had just gotten much higher. It wasn't just about reclaiming my life anymore. I had to find a way to stop these entities, to protect my world from their invasion. As I steeled myself for the challenges ahead, I made a silent vow. I would find a way back, warn everyone about the danger, and put an end to these mirror entities once and for all. I stood in the warped reflection of my living room, addressing the small group of trapped souls I had managed to gather. Their translucent forms shimmered in the eerie light of the mirror world, their eyes a mix of fear and hope. "We can't just sit here and fade away," I said, my voice echoing strangely in the twisted space. "We need to fight back against these entities. Together we might have a chance." A woman stepped forward, her form flickering like a candle flame. "But how?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're barely more than shadows here. What can we do against them?" I took a deep breath, remembering the old man's words. "Our will is our strongest weapon here. If we combine our strength, our desire to return home, we might be able to affect this world in ways we couldn't individually." A murmur went through the group. Some looked skeptical, others hopeful. An elderly man, his form more solid than most, spoke up. "I've been here longer than any of you," he said, his voice gravelly with age. "And I've never seen anyone escape. But I've never seen anyone try to fight back either. Maybe it's time we did." Slowly, one by one, the trapped souls nodded their agreement. We were an unlikely resistance, a motley crew of lost souls from different times and places, united by our desire to reclaim our lives. Over the next few days, if time even worked the same way in this twisted realm, we experimented with our abilities. We discovered that our emotions could indeed affect the physical properties of the mirror world. Anger made the surfaces ripple and crack. Fear created swirling mists that obscured our surroundings. And hope made everything a little more solid, a little more real. "Focus on your strongest memories," I instructed the group as we gathered around the cracked living room mirror. "Think about the people you love, the life you want to return to. Channel all of that emotion into the crack." We joined hands, forming a circle around the mirror. As we concentrated, I could feel a surge of energy building. The air around us crackled with unseen power. The crack in the mirror began to widen, spiderwebbing across the surface. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through my head. I gasped, staggering backward. "Something's pushing back," I managed to say through gritted teeth. The others felt it too. The woman who had spoken earlier cried out, her form flickering violently. "They know what we're doing," she shouted. "The entities are fighting us." The mirror world around us began to distort even further, twisting into nightmarish shapes. Shadows deepened, taking on menacing forms. From every reflective surface we could hear the entity's furious howls. "Don't give up," I yelled, pushing through the pain. "We're getting through. Keep focusing." We redoubled our efforts, pouring every ounce of will and emotion we had into the widening crack. The mirror's surface bulged outward, like a membrane about to burst. For a moment I thought we would succeed. Then, with a sound like shattering glass multiplied 1,000-fold, the world around us exploded into chaos. The floor beneath our feet became a roiling sea of mercurial reflections. The walls melted and reformed into grotesque shapes. And from every direction, the entities attacked. They were no longer content to simply chase us. Now they fought with a fury born of desperation. Shadowy tendrils lashed out, trying to ensnare us. Disembodied voices whispered terrible things, playing on our deepest fears. "We have to retreat," the elderly man shouted, batting away a grasping shadow with surprising strength. "We're not ready for this." I knew he was right, but I couldn't bear the thought of giving up when we'd come so close. As the others fell back, I made one last, desperate lunge for the cracked mirror. My hand plunged through the surface, and for a brief, glorious moment, I felt the warmth of the real world on my skin. I could see my living room, solid and real, just inches away. "Karen," I shouted, hoping against hope that my wife might hear me. "Tommy, I'm here. I'm coming back." Then something grabbed me from behind, yanking me back into the mirror world with terrifying strength. I found myself face to face with my doppelganger, its stolen features twisted with rage. "You fool," it snarled, its voice a horrifying mix of my own and something utterly inhuman. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" I struggled against its grip, but it was like fighting against quicksand. The more I resisted, the more it seemed to pull me in. "Let me go," I shouted, my voice echoing through the chaotic mirror world. The entity laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, I don't think so," it said, its grin widening impossibly. "You've caused quite enough trouble already. It's time you learned your place in this world." With that, it began to drag me deeper into the mirror realm, away from the crack, away from my one chance at freedom. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, but it wasn't enough. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard a familiar voice cry out. "Mr. Thompson." Lily's face appeared in the cracked mirror, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "Hold on," she shouted. "I'm going to help you." The entity snarled, its grip on me loosening for just a moment in its surprise. It was all the opening I needed. With a surge of will born of desperate hope, I wrenched myself free and lunged for the mirror. "Lily," I cried out, "can you hear me?" She nodded frantically. "Yes, what do I do? How can I help?" I could feel the entity regaining its composure, preparing to attack again. I had only seconds. "The mirrors," I shouted. "Break the mirrors in my house. It'll weaken their hold on this world." Lily's face disappeared from view, and I heard the sound of running footsteps. The entity roared in fury, lunging for me again. But before it could reach me, there was a tremendous crash from the real world. The mirror world shuddered violently. Cracks appeared in every surface, spreading like wildfire. The entity stumbled, its form flickering and distorting. "No!" it howled. "What have you done?" I didn't wait to find out. Taking advantage of the chaos, I ran back to where the other trapped souls had retreated. They were huddled together, their forms strengthened by their shared resolve. "Quick!" I shouted. "While they're weakened, focus on the cracks. Push through." As one, we concentrated all our will, all our hope and desperation on the fractures spreading through the mirror world. I could feel the barriers between worlds thinning, becoming permeable. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering at once, the world around us began to dissolve. I caught glimpses of the real world through the cracks. My living room, Lily wielding a baseball bat, my wife and son rushing in with looks of shock on their faces. "Hold on," I yelled to the other souls. "We're going home." As the mirror world crumbled around us, I felt a tremendous pulling sensation. It was like being caught in a whirlpool, dragged inexorably towards something. I closed my eyes, clinging to the hope that on the other side of this maelstrom, I would find my way back to reality. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the enraged scream of the entities, their stolen world collapsing around them. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the floor of my living room, surrounded by shards of broken mirror. Lily was kneeling beside me, her eyes wide with concern. Karen and Tommy stood frozen in the doorway, their expressions a mix of shock, disbelief, and dawning hope. "Jack?" Karen whispered, her voice trembling. Is it really you?" I sat up slowly, feeling solid and real for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "It's me," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm back." As my family rushed to embrace me, tears of joy and relief streaming down their faces, I caught a glimpse of movement in one of the few remaining mirror shards. For just a moment, I saw the face of my doppelganger, its expression a mixture of fury and fear. Then it was gone, leaving only my own reflection staring back at me. I knew this wasn't over. The entities were weakened, but not defeated, and there were still other trapped souls to save. But for now, wrapped in the arms of my loved ones, I allowed myself to feel the simple joy of being home. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And I had a feeling it was about to spill over into the real world in ways none of us could have imagined. I stood in the shadowy realm between worlds, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Before me, my doppelganger paced restlessly, its stolen face a mask of frustration. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a crack in its confident facade. "You can't hide forever," I called out, my voice echoing strangely in this liminal space. "It's time to face what you've done." The entity whirled around, its eyes widening in shock as it saw me. For a moment its form flickered, revealing the otherworldly creature beneath the stolen skin. "How?" it hissed, its voice a distorted version of my own. "How are you here?" I took a step forward, feeling a surge of power as I did so. "I'm stronger than you thought. We all are. The people you've trapped, the lives you've stolen, we're fighting back." The doppelganger's face twisted into a snarl. "You're nothing," it spat. "A fading memory. A ghost that should have disappeared by now." "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady. "I'm very real, and I'm here to take back what's mine." With that, I launched myself at the entity, my mind focused on a single goal: reclaiming my life. As we collided, the world around us exploded into chaos. We weren't just fighting physically. This was a battle of wills, of identities. Images flashed around us, memories from my life, distorted reflections of the mirror world, glimpses of realities I couldn't comprehend. "This life is mine now," the entity roared, its form shifting and warping as we grappled. "I've lived it better than you ever did." I gritted my teeth, pushing back against the onslaught of images and emotions. "You've stolen it," I growled. "It was never yours to take." As we fought, I could feel the fabric of reality straining around us. The barrier between worlds, already weakened by our previous efforts, was beginning to crumble. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice cutting through the chaos. "Dad, Dad, can you hear me?" It was Tommy, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I turned my head, catching a glimpse of my son through a shimmering tear in reality. He was standing in our living room, his hands pressed against a mirror. "Tommy," I called out. "I'm here." "I'm fighting to come back," the doppelganger snarled, redoubling its efforts to overpower me. "They're not your family anymore," it hissed. "They're mine. I've been there for them in ways you never were." Its words stung, but I pushed the pain aside. "You're wrong," I said, meeting its gaze. They know the truth now. They're fighting for me. As if to prove my point, I heard Karen's voice join Tommy's. Jack, we believe in you. Come back to us. Their voices gave me strength. I pushed back against the entity, forcing it to retreat step by step. But as we fought, the world around us began to fracture even more. Mirrors appeared and shattered in rapid succession. The ground beneath our feet became unstable, shifting between solid matter and liquid reflections. Reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams. What's happening? The entity cried out, its confidence finally cracking. What have you done? I realized with a jolt of fear that our battle was destabilizing both worlds. If we didn't stop soon, we might both be trapped in a shattered limbo, neither here nor there. We have to stop, I said, trying to catch my breath. Look around us. We're tearing everything apart. The doppelganger laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Stop? Why should I stop? If I can't have this life, why should you? It lunged at me again, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped its attack, using its momentum to throw it off balance. As it stumbled, I caught a glimpse of something in its eyes. Fear. You're afraid, I said, the realization dawning on me. You're not just fighting for my life anymore. You're fighting for your own existence. The entity's form flickered violently, its stolen face contorting with a mixture of rage and terror. You know nothing, it screamed. But I did know. In that moment, I understood the entity in a way I hadn't before. It wasn't just a malevolent force. It was a being fighting for survival, for the right to exist as more than a mere reflection. Listen to me, I said, my voice softer now. We don't have to destroy each other. There has to be another way. The doppelganger hesitated, its attack faltering. What other way? It asked, suspicion clear in its voice. There's only one life. Only one of us can have it. Before I could respond, the world around us shuddered violently. Cracks spread across every surface, reality splintering like a broken mirror. Jack! Karen's voice called out, sounding distant and distorted. The mirrors are breaking. We can't hold on much longer. I looked at the doppelganger, seeing my own fear reflected in its eyes. We're out of time, I said urgently. We have to work together or we'll both be lost. For a long moment, the entity stared at me, conflict clear on its face. Then, slowly, it nodded. What do we do? I held out my hand. We stop fighting each other and start fighting for both our existences. Together. As the doppelganger reached out to take my hand, the world exploded into blinding light. I felt a sensation of falling, of being torn apart and reassembled. Images flashed before my eyes. My life, the entity's experiences in the mirror world, realities I couldn't comprehend. And then, suddenly, stillness. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on the floor of my living room, surrounded by shards of broken mirror. Karen, Tommy, and Lily were kneeling beside me, their faces a mixture of concern and hope. Jack, Karen whispered, reaching out to touch my face. Is it really you? I sat up slowly, my head spinning. It's me, I said, my voice hoarse. I'm back. As my family embraced me, tears of joy and relief flowing freely, I caught sight of my reflection in a remaining shard of mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something else, a hint of the entity that had stolen my life. But then it was gone, leaving only my own tired, relieved face staring back at me. What happened? Tommy asked, his eyes wide with wonder and lingering fear. How did you come back? I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the jumble of memories and sensations. It's a long story, I said, but I think we found a way to coexist. Karen looked at me sharply. What do you mean, we? I met her gaze, seeing the fear and uncertainty there. The entity that took my place, it's not gone, but it's not in control either. We've reached a kind of understanding. Dad, that sounds really scary. Tommy said, his voice trembling slightly. I pulled him close, ruffling his hair. I know, buddy, but I promise you, I'm still me. I'm still your dad. We've just gained something. An understanding of a world beyond our own. Lily, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Does this mean the mirror people won't try to take over anymore? I looked at her, marveling at her bravery and quick understanding. I hope so, Lily. I really hope so. As I sat there, surrounded by my family and the remnants of the shattered mirrors, I knew that our ordeal wasn't over. The barrier between worlds was still fragile, and there were other entities out there, other trapped souls. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel the simple joy of being home. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. My family, the allies I'd made in the mirror world, and the part of me that now understood both sides of the reflection. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I stood in the shimmering space between worlds, the fractured remains of reality swirling around me. My allies, the trapped souls I'd rallied in the mirror world, gathered close, their forms flickering like candle flames in a strong wind. There's only one way to end this, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of what I was about to propose. We have to destroy the mirror world entirely. A collective gasp went through the group. The old man who had first helped me stepped forward, his mercury eyes wide with disbelief. Destroy it? But this realm has existed for eons. The consequences could be catastrophic. I nodded grimly. I know. But if we don't, the entities will keep finding ways to cross over. They'll keep stealing lives, trapping souls. We have to end it once and for all. A woman, her form barely more than a translucent outline, spoke up. But what about us? If we destroy this world, what happens to the trapped souls? I met her gaze, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. We focus all our energy on creating a path back to the real world as we tear this one apart. It's risky, but it's our only chance. There was a moment of tense silence as my words sank in. Then, one by one, the trapped souls nodded their agreement. They knew, as I did, that this was our last, desperate gambit. How do we do this? Asked a young man, his form more solid than most, suggesting he hadn't been trapped for long. I took a deep breath, centering myself. We channel every ounce of our will, our desire to return home, into fracturing the very fabric of this reality. We need to create a cascading effect, like cracks spreading through glass. As I spoke, I could feel a change in the air around us. The mirror world, already unstable from our previous battles, seemed to shudder in anticipation. Or was it fear? Everyone, join hands, I instructed. Focus on your strongest memories of home, of the lives you want to return to. Let that desire fuel your will. We formed a circle, our hands linked. As we concentrated, I could feel an immense energy building. The air crackled with unseen power. The ground beneath our feet began to ripple and distort. Now, I shouted, push with everything you have. A surge of collective will exploded outward from our circle. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Reality itself seemed to scream as it tore apart. Mirrors shattered in every direction, their fragments swirling in a maelstrom of broken reflections. Through the chaos, I caught glimpses of the real world, fleeting images of homes, loved ones, lives interrupted. The trapped souls began to flicker and fade, drawn towards these fragments of their former existence. Go! I yelled over the deafening sound of a world tearing itself apart. Find your way back. One by one, the souls vanished, pulled through the fractures in reality. I felt a surge of hope. It was working. But as the last of my allies disappeared, I realized with a sinking feeling that I was still here. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? A familiar voice sneered. I turned to see my doppelganger standing amidst the swirling chaos, its form flickering between my appearance and something altogether more alien. Its eyes blazed with a mixture of fury and desperation. It's over, I said. trying to sound more confident than I felt. This world is collapsing, you've lost. The entity laughed, a harsh, grating sound. If I've lost, so have you. You're still here, aren't you? Trapped, just like me. I realized with a jolt that it was right. In focusing on saving the others, I'd neglected to secure my own escape. But there was no time for regret now. Then I guess this ends with just you and me, I said, squaring my shoulders. The doppelganger's form solidified, becoming a perfect mirror image of myself. So be it, it snarled. We lunged at each other, grappling at the very edge of existence. All around us, the mirror world continued to disintegrate. Shards of broken reality swirled past us, slicing at our forms. I felt myself weakening, my very essence seeming to unravel in this maelstrom of destruction. But the entity was weakening too. Its grip on my throat faltered, its stolen face contorting with pain and fear. In its eyes I saw a reflection of my own desperation, the primal fear of ceasing to exist. For a moment I felt a pang of empathy. This being, for all its malevolence, was fighting for survival just as I was. But I knew there could be no coexistence, no compromise. One of us had to go. With a surge of will I didn't know I still possessed, I broke free from its grasp. We stood facing each other on a rapidly shrinking island of stability in a sea of chaos. It doesn't have to end like this, the entity said, its voice a mixture of my own and something utterly alien. We could still find a way to survive together. I shook my head. There's no place for you in my world, and I won't let you trap anyone else here ever again. With that, I charged forward, catching the doppelganger off guard. We teetered on the edge of the void, locked in a final desperate struggle. If I go, you're coming with me, it screamed, clawing at my face. I could feel myself slipping, being pulled into the swirling nothingness. But in that moment, I heard something, faint but unmistakable. Voices calling my name. Jack, Dad, come back to us, Karen and Tommy. Somehow, they were reaching out to me across the barrier between worlds. Their voices gave me strength, anchoring me to my reality. With one final monumental effort, I shoved the entity away from me. It teetered on the brink for a moment, its eyes wide with shock and fear. Then, with a scream that seemed to echo through every broken shard of the mirror world, it fell into the void. But as it disappeared, I felt a terrible pulling sensation. The collapse of the mirror world was accelerating, and I was being dragged along with it. I scrambled for purchase, but there was nothing solid left to hold on to. No, I shouted, more in frustration than fear. I won't let it end like this. I reached out, not with my hands, but with my will, my very essence. I focused on the voices of my family, using them as a lifeline to pull myself towards reality. The void yawned beneath me, a hungry maw threatening to swallow me whole. Fragments of broken mirrors swirled around me, cutting and slicing. I felt myself stretching, tearing, my very being threatening to unravel. Jack, Karen's voice stronger now. Take my hand. I reached out, straining with every fiber of my being. For an agonizing moment, I felt nothing but the pull of oblivion. Then, miraculously, I felt something solid, a hand grasping mine. With a final reality-bending lurch, I felt myself being pulled free of the collapsing mirror world. There was a sensation of passing through a membrane, a moment of searing pain, and then I opened my eyes to find myself lying on the floor of my living room, surrounded by shards of broken mirrors. Karen and Tommy were kneeling beside me, their faces streaked with tears of relief. Dad, Tommy cried, throwing his arms around me. You're back. Karen helped me sit up, her hands trembling as she touched my face. Jack, is it really over? I looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings of my home. Everything seemed normal, solid, real. But as my gaze fell on a remaining shard of mirror, I saw only my own reflection staring back at me. No hint of the entity, no glimpse of the shattered world beyond. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. I think it's really over. As I held my family close, I knew that the scars of this ordeal would take time to heal. The memory of the mirror world, of the entity that had stolen my life, would haunt me for years to come. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel the simple, profound joy of being home. The mirror world was gone, its threats and terrors banished to oblivion. But as I looked at my reflection in the broken shard, I couldn't help but wonder what other realities might lie just beyond the surface of every mirror, every reflection. And would we ever truly be safe from the things that lurk on the other side of the glass? The cold tile of the bathroom floor pressed against my cheek as I slowly regained consciousness. My head throbbed, and the taste of copper lingered in my mouth. I blinked, trying to focus on my surroundings. Shards of broken mirror glittered around me like a constellation of fallen stars. For a moment, panic gripped me. Was I truly back? Or was this another trick of the mirror world, a cruel illusion designed to break my spirit? I pushed myself up, wincing at the ache in my muscles. My reflection stared back at me from 100 fractured pieces, each one showing a slightly different version of my battered face. But it was my face, not the smooth, predatory visage of the doppelganger. "Karen?" I called out, my voice raspy and uncertain. "Tommy?" Footsteps thundered up the stairs, and suddenly the bathroom door burst open. Karen stood there, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Jack, oh my God, are you okay?" She rushed to my side, carefully avoiding the glass as she knelt beside me. Her hands fluttered over me, checking for injuries. "I heard the crash and I was afraid you'd gone back there." I leaned into her touch, savoring the warmth and solidity of her presence. "I'm here," I assured her. "I'm really here." Tommy appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide. "Dad? What happened?" I managed a weak smile. "Just a little accident, buddy. Nothing to worry about." But even as I said the words, I felt something stir within me. A strange electric sensation that danced just beneath my skin. I glanced at the broken mirror, and for a split second I could have sworn I saw the shards reassemble themselves before scattering once more. Over the next few weeks, as I recovered from my ordeal, I began to notice changes. At first, they were small things. Reflections that seemed to linger a moment too long. The ability to see clearer in the dark. A heightened awareness of the world around me. But as time passed, I realized that I had brought back more than just memories from the mirror world. Somehow a piece of its power had latched onto me, becoming a part of my very being. It started one night as I was getting ready for bed. I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror and felt a sudden pull. Without thinking, I reached out and touched the glass. To my astonishment, my hand passed through as if the mirror were made of water. I yanked my hand back, heart pounding, but curiosity soon overcame fear, and I found myself experimenting with this new ability. I discovered that I could not only pass through mirrors but also manipulate reflections, bending them to my will. "Jack?" Karen's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Is everything okay? You've been in here for an hour." I turned to her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Karen, I think something's happened to me. Something from that place." It followed me back. Her eyes widened as I demonstrated my newfound abilities. At first, she was terrified, worried that the entity had somehow possessed me. But as days passed and I remained myself, she began to accept this new reality. "What are you going to do?" she asked one night as we lay in bed, her head resting on my chest. I stared at the ceiling, considering. I think I need to use this to help others who might have gone through what I did. And so began my secret crusade. By day, I returned to my normal life, trying to mend the relationships that had been strained by my absence. But at night, I used my abilities to seek out others who had brushed against the mirror world. I found them in hospitals, diagnosed with delusions. In homeless shelters, their wild stories of stolen lives dismissed as the ravings of the unstable. In suburban homes, where families struggled to understand why their loved ones now flinched at their own reflections. One such case led me to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. A young woman named Mia had been committed to a psychiatric facility after insisting that her reflection was trying to kill her. I stood outside her door, taking a deep breath before knocking. A pale, frightened face appeared in the crack as the door opened. "Mia," I said gently. "My name is Jack. I know you might not believe this, but I know what you've been through, and I'm here to help." Her eyes widened, a glimmer of hope breaking through the fear. You believe me?" I nodded, holding out my hand. As she took it, I allowed a small demonstration of my power, causing her reflection in a nearby window to wave independently. Mia gasped, tears filling her eyes. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "No," I assured her. "You're not. And you're not alone." Over the years, I helped dozens of people like Mia. Some, like me, had escaped the mirror world. Others were still fighting against encroaching entities unaware of the true nature of their struggle. With each person I helped, I felt like I was making amends for the chaos I had unleashed by fracturing the barrier between worlds. 5 years passed. Tommy grew into a teenager. Karen and I rebuilt our relationship stronger than ever, and I began to think that perhaps the nightmare was truly behind us. I still used my abilities, but less frequently now. The cases of mirror world interference had dwindled to almost nothing. It was a crisp autumn day when everything changed. I was walking down a busy street, my mind on a meeting I was headed to, when something caught my eye in a store window. A familiar smirk, there and gone in an instant. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It couldn't be. We had destroyed the mirror world, banished the entities, hadn't we? But as I stared at my reflection, I saw it again. A flicker, a distortion. My own face, but not quite. The smirk widened, and I heard a voice that existed only in my mind. "Did you really think it was over, Jack?" I stumbled back, bumping into passers-by who shot me annoyed looks, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window. My reflection was normal now, showing only my own pale, shocked face. But I knew what I had seen. As I stood there, the realization washed over me like a cold wave. The battle against the mirror entities was far from over. Perhaps it had never truly ended. They were still out there, waiting, watching from behind every reflective surface. I turned away from the window, my mind racing. I had work to do, people to warn, to protect. The war had entered a new phase, and I was the only one who knew it was coming. As I hurried home, I couldn't help but wonder how many others were out there, catching glimpses of something wrong in their mirrors. How many were dismissing that uneasy feeling when they looked at their reflection, telling themselves it was just their imagination? And most chilling of all, how many of us were really us and how many were something else, something that had slipped through the cracks between worlds? I reached for my phone, ready to call Karen and tell her to cover all the mirrors in the house. As I did, I caught sight of my reflection in the phone's dark screen. For a moment, just the barest fraction of a second, I could have sworn I saw it wink at me. The battle was far from over. In fact, it might just be beginning.